Hello, everyone. We are live, and welcome to another stream. My name is John Sierra. You cannot see them just yet, but I have a Matt Richardson with me. That was his cue to say something.
Oh, hi, everybody. Hi, John.
And I also have a Sid Kemp with me.
Happy to be here, guys.
Okay, and I'm just going to very briefly use the opportunity to get the word out that I am live to my usual the usual places that I do that. So this, if you're watching my screen on Discord, it's gonna do a whole bunch of crazy things. Just ignore that. She will be done soon. Hold on. Oh, where do I go? Here it is. This one. Hey, Chocolate, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. And one more. Okay, and now I'm going to go over to like Facebook and all that. And we're not going to be sitting here all that long because we're all eager to get started. I don't know about you two gentlemen, but I have been vibrating with excitement all day to do this.
Me too.
And, well, hello there, Alice. Okay, let me go over to Facebook and Twitter and all that. Hey, Wayne, how's it going?
Our announcements had about 1,200 hits on Quora.
Wow, that's actually pretty good for something that isn't just like a question. That's a positive result right there.
Yeah, 1,200 is a lot.
I'm happy, very happy with, especially since you're looking at the one you made or the one I made.
It's just the one I made.
Yeah, and that was only like a day ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had 1,200 on my own.
Wow, that's so good.
I don't know how many you had.
Well, I posted a few announcements, so it's probably a little bit more spread out. But last time I had looked at it, wasn't 1,200. I'll just put it to you that way.
Oh. Yeah, but John, earlier today you told me that you got 8 new subscribers on
today.
YouTube.
That is true.
They may well have come from Quora.
That could be true. Just let's look at the YouTube subscribers right now. 2 more since then. We're at 790 right now. The goal is, of course, 1,000. But this is going to be exciting. We're going to be officially starting at 7:30, but right now we're just sort of letting everybody sort of come on in and take their shoes off. Of course, if you're like us, you're like hobbits, you don't wear shoes, right?
Warmier just walked in and is washing his feet.
One does not simply walk into... I'm sorry, Matt.
I can't get my furry feet into any shoes.
Well, you must be a hardfoot then.
Yep, they're real furry.
Because only the Stoors ever wore boots. I remember I was answering a question on Quora about, like, do hobbits ever wear shoes? And I go, like, generally speaking, no. Tolkien did imagine at one point that he was going to write that they got shoes in Rivendell, and that would explain how their feet held up during the attempt at crossing Carathras, but he didn't put it in there. So
yeah, that's not the Shire anymore, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, you think about like all the places they went through, the Dead Marshes and Mordor and Carathras. That's a lot to put your feet through, even for a hobbit, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hobbit shoes or not hobbit shoes? Just kind of like the Balrog wings theory.
The wings theory, meaning that there are people out there who are wrong.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I got asked a specific question. It was a very hyper-specific question just the other day about, is Gothmog the only Balrog that has wings? And I'm like, where are you getting that from? No, none of them do. So bizarre.
I interpret wings of shadow differently. I think they are wings made of shadow.
Yeah, that is a valid interpretation, I think.
That's where I am too. Yeah. I think there's something.
But they can't. They can't fly, or
no, certainly.
No.
Certainly. Otherwise, Duran's vein would have fewer problems.
You and I had a good conversation about that a while ago. said, I totally agree. They do not fly in any way, shape, or form. I just think that his references twice to there being something there, either stuck between this plane or the other plane or something, is real. There's something there for sure. But yeah, so
I always
wings.
like where there's a specific illustration of a Balrog, or specifically of Durin's Bane, that I like, where it shows, wispy shadows coming out of the Balrog, and if you squint, it looks like wings. It alludes to the shape of wings, but it's clearly not wings. And I've used this specific illustration many times when I'm talking about specifically Durin's Bane.
That's a hard picture to render.
There is my other favorite depiction of a Balrog is actually with Glorfindel, and it's the only time that I've seen anybody draw the Balrog wearing a helmet, which Tolkien did say that specific Balrog did wear a helmet.
That was Gothmog.
No, that was not Gothmog, because Gothmog died in Gondolin when Ecthelion killed him.
Well, which one? I know there's a reference to one of them wearing a helmet.
Yeah, that was the one that Glorfindel fought on the cliff as they were escaping.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Glorfindel. Because it said that he used his sword to cleave the helm of the Balrog. And then they started grappling, and he reached up with his dagger, and he got him right in the stomach. And then the Balrog fell and grabbed his hair. I got a lot of questions about elf hair color lately. Have you guys been seeing that sort of strange resurgence of that?
I had a couple of them that I responded to about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I kind of went after it. They were kind of long articles, but yeah.
I'm going to move you guys over here.
I didn't, but hey, I'll throw one at you. Are there any elves with red hair?
According to Peter Jackson, yes. According to me, I don't see why not. He doesn't ever mention elves as having red hair. Usually, the character that is almost universally depicted as a redhead in popular art is actually Sauron.
He uses the term ruddy, complected, or midros.
Well, that's complexion. That's not hair.
Well, I know, but there's other references saying that the elves had hair color were diverse.
Yeah, I'm sure there were redhead elves. I'm sure there's no reason why there wouldn't be.
Yeah. I kind of doubt it, actually, just because he mentions hair so often, and he mentions extraordinary hair often. So, if it had been there, I think it would have shown up.
Maybe that's a good point as well. Okay, gentlemen, we're ready to start, and we're going to come over to where is my controls? Here we are. We're going to come on over to here. And hello, everyone. We are the Council of Tolkien. I have Matt Richardson. Oh, it's mirrored. I have Matt Richardson over there on the left side of the screen. I have Sid Kemp here on the right side of the screen. And everybody, we're going to be talking for the next little while about topics that mean a lot to us. But first, we're going to sort of introduce ourselves. Now, a lot of you guys who are watching this, you kind of already know who I am. I'm going to give a brief introduction. But first, I want to introduce you to my co-hosts. So let's start with Sid. Sid, tell me a bit about yourself, how you came to be here, and most importantly, what makes you unique as a Tolkien writer?
I first read Tolkien when I was 12 years old, never left Middle-earth, and that's why I'm here. What makes me different, perhaps unique as a Tolkien writer, is I tend to almost always begin with Tolkien's letters, because in his letters he spoke very straightforwardly. Eru Ilúvatar is the one creator god of the Abrahamic faiths. Morgoth is Satan, and no one else is a specific image of anyone else in the Bible, in mythology, in folklore, in history, period. And that kind of clarity that you get from the letters guides what I write. And the other odd thing about me is I live as if Tolkien's legendarium and myths and history are our past. Of course, I know it's a legend, but so is the Bible and so is the Big Bang. So what I find is that to live this way is deeply uplifting. To say, if we have this genealogy and history of magic, of light and love in a dark world, how do we live today? That guides my life.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Matt, same question to you. What brings you here? Tell me a bit about yourself and what makes you unique as a Tolkien writer.
My first exposure was The Hobbit in when I was 11, so that would have been 1977, and I read the Lord of the Rings by the time I had graduated from high school, and pretty soon thereafter I started with the Silmarillion. I went basically in that order. But I've been doing this off and on for pleasure or for semi-professional purposes for the last 40 years, maybe 38 years roughly. And my experience has really been the research aspect of it. I would say math, science, going down those passages that have more evidence to them than not, as we all have talked about in the past about how funny sometimes that can be when you just let yourself put some things together and let evidence be evidence, even if there's not conclusive evidence. There's a lot of evidence to find out there, and that's what makes Tolkien so interesting to me. Which is, for people who've researched it for a lot of years, a fresh take or a deeper take on things really becomes interesting, and that's one of the things I think I bring to this realm, if you want to call it, in writing and researching, and that leads to some very interesting conclusions and some really interesting dialogues. I also am very interested in the lessons that Tolkien is talking about. He's really talking about the struggle between good and evil, dark and light, temptation and dutiful obedience to the order that is present in the world. And so those general themes are fascinating to me, especially the way he writes about them. And that's what makes it really, really interesting to me, and especially to be a part of this team here.
Thank you, Matt. And a very interesting observation that I came up with, because this is so indicative of you too, is that Sid is very much the spiritual side of things and the metaphysical side of things, and that Matt is dealing with the more, we'll say, practical or even heathenistic, in a sense, side of things, and the analytical and measurements and things like that. And also, Sid said, I said before we started that you guys would have as much time as you'd like to introduce yourself, and Sid was just very brief, and Matt was very not brief. Not that there's anything wrong with either approach. It's just interesting how we all have our different approaches and ways of working about it. To do my own sort of thing, I've been reading Tolkien.
One thing, John, first.
Go ahead.
No
Sid.
problem. Speaking of approaches, what I found interesting is that Matt and I are similar, and you too, John, are in one way of being fact-based, evidence-based. But Matt, and I really love this about him, is fact-based in an engineering way. Mm-hmm. And at least I'm an engineer in daily life, but I'm fact-based as a historian when I think and read Tolkien. So I'm very aware of what of Tolkien saying everything came through the Red Book of Westmarch. That's just the Elvish and Hobbit view. There's so much more history here, and I look for the facts of history, even as I go mystical and mythological. And Matt focuses on the technical facts. Yes. And I think we both would enjoy a good meal anywhere from Brie to Rivendell.
Things that could be measured are definitely, Matt, that's your thing. Things that can be measured in inches or in centimeters or in gallons, whereas Sid, I think you're measuring things in miles or in years. And then I'm more of the linguistic approach. I've started reading Tolkien when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I read The Hobbit, which was actually a part of a school project, but I fell in love with it. Read it over and over again. Lord of the Rings when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and then just since then I haven't stopped. And what would make me unique is that I do pay attention to the living, breathing world. I think that that's what makes Tolkien unique, is that he made a living, breathing world that you really could believe existed, that you really could see that everybody has their own life and lives that way. And oftentimes when I'm writing one of my articles or answering a question, people will say to me afterwards, wow, he really did think of everything. And Christopher Tolkien once said that the world of Arda exists for itself. It does not exist for the real world. We're just looking at it, and that's very true. We can take lessons from it, and we can see the author's thoughts in what he writes, but we are visitors in his world, so to speak, and that's sort of my approach there.
I would say one thing that you guys have both mentioned, but I want to I want to clarify something. I think that people who are listening might be interested as well, and that is my angle on science or measurement or metrics or any of these kind of things aren't so much related to being in love with the metrics and the physicality of things so much.
Wait,
It
no,
really
hold on.
actually
I
is.
think you are, because you get so enthusiastic and so excited when you talk about this stuff. Your inner child bursts forth in a very real way.
Well, I hear that. I'm not saying you're not right. I'm just saying I don't think it's the majority aspect of what goes on in my mind about things.
Mm-hmm.
What's mainly going on in my mind as a majority interest about these kind of things is the deeper physical presentation of the fantasy.
Yes.
Like how how big is how big is Morgoth? Is there a way to figure out how big roughly he is? Is there a way to figure out how
And
heavy he would be?
and
What
and
is it?
when
What does it mean when you walk from the lower depths of Angband and
yeah
you can hear him walking? I mean, he
when
has mass, so
when somebody
that's the
asks
part
me
of the
that, like,
fantasy that is interesting.
that's how we differ. But it's interesting because people ask me, well, how tall was Morgoth? It's hard for me not to say, well, tall enough, like just use your imagination a little bit. Tolkien said he was as big as a tower. There's a lot of different. The tower could be very small or it could be very, very big. And that was also, like, and Sid talked about this. That was the elvish lore that was there. They looked at the peaks of Thangorodrim, which were really just slag heaps, like that were smoking because of they were industrial chimneys. But the elves saw what looked like mountains that were smoking, and they said volcanoes. So, everybody has their own approach.
Yeah, I'd like to highlight something in that.
Yes.
When I met Matt, and he mentioned this, but it was a turning moment for me. How tall is Morgoth? Fair number of people go for that, but how heavy? And that added to me an experiential physical, brought forth the physicality, which if you're making a movie, this was about two different Wonder Woman movies that made the same point. If everybody can fly, there's no fun in the fights because nobody can fall.
Yep.
And the physicality, the ability to falter, the ability to get hurt, as Morgoth is eternally wounded. And Matt, in saying how much does Sauron's, I use the wrong word probably, Morningstar or mace weigh, and how much would it smash when it hit? That the physicality of that, especially in the making of the movies or art or video games, is just a level I had never thought you had to go to. But when he said it, it became obvious how important that is. And at the same
Well, the
time,
reason
at the same time, John, what you're mentioning is what Tolkien said to his readers. I want you to see it in your own mind, your own way, and make it real for you.
Yep.
So both of these sides are such a deep part of what Tolkien brought in his work.
I would just say that when you think about the parameters of how big Morgoth was, there was an article I wrote a while ago called it was related to the aha moment, and I shared that with Sid a while ago, which was this passage about the elves being summoned to come back to live
Oh, this was
with
at the
the Ainur.
knees, right?
This is at the
Yeah.
knees
Yeah.
passage. Um, and you look at old colloquial English, that was what gave me the idea that this is heads about the knees as the Valar are seated in their thrones in a casual setting in human form. So when you take a look at elves being 7 foot ish, let's just say, or a little bit over that for the early elves, as some of these sizes are generally accepted from other types of passages. Well, then human physiology is times four from the distance from the ground to the knee for almost all humans, give or take an inch or two, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that when you do that, you get to 30 feet, and if you're 30 feet and you're in a physical form with gravity and weight and mass and creating
Which
smoke
we
pits
know
in the earth.
100% he was definitely in physical
Yeah,
form.
yeah, right. We know that it's confirmed that it was physics was operable. The Earth was this Earth, generally speaking, in those regards. And so the square cube law then becomes important because Galileo, we still use it today. Everybody uses square cube law. But if you have expansion of weight, height, and size and mass, you just plug it in and you're going to be within 20, 30 pounds. And this is why Morgoth is probably about 11 tons. And if you're 30 foot tall in human form and you're generally muscular, that's going to be your weight. So the
So
point
was
that
this
when
before
you're
or after
thinking,
the Atkins diet?
well, I'm thinking of him in a muscular, not overweight, humanistic, athletic type form. But when you compare that with the passages about creating smoking pits in the ground when Grond misses Fingolfin, then my mind goes
Fingolfin.
to,
No, no, no,
well,
you've just hit on the whole linguistic aspect. I have to stop. Fingolfin.
Fingolfin,
Yes.
Fingolfin, that there's these pits in the earth that were created by a mace that Tolkien, in his
Hammer. It
own
was a
canon,
hammer.
is saying that a hammer, right? But hammers were called maces were called hammers in the Dark Ages, Middle Ages. The point is that when they are hitting the ground, well, how much force does that require? And there's a
A
way to
lot.
figure that
A
out.
lot.
A lot.
That would be my answer.
Yeah.
You see, and this happened not too long ago where I got a question through Quora that was very much in this sort of vein, and I was just like, you know what? I can just tag Matt in this, and I sent that right over to him. And if I was to get a question that was more of a spiritual nature that I didn't feel like answering, I would send it right over to Sid.
The kind of question I hate would be,
Oh, well,
could
that's...
Thor lift up Morgoth's hammer?
Yes, of course he could. But that actually brings us to the actual format of our show. Now that the introductions are done and we've bored everybody, let's actually get to the actual format. So this is how it's going to work. Each week, the three of us come to the table with a certain topic that we want to talk about. I'm going to go first, and then Matt is going to go second, and then Sid is going to go third. It will not always be in that order, but for the first episode, that is the order that we're going to go in. So it's a topic that I'm going to bring up, and then we're going to discuss it for about a half an hour. Well, I actually have a timer that is going to be running, and once that's up, we'll all have our final thoughts and everything, and then we'll move on to what Matt has to bring to the table. So my topic for our first episode here as the Council of Tolkien is, as writers, as people who generally ask and answer questions, I guess for us it's a lot more answering than asking. We ask questions of each other, but through the general public being asked questions. What are some of the topics that you feel should have been put to bed already? The topics that we're just tired of hearing about, the topics that are played out. What are you tired of writing about? I'm going to say that for me, there's a few of them. The biggest one for me, and I think you guys will agree with me, I'm tired of people asking why didn't they just fly the eagles to Mordor in The Lord of the Rings. It's a boring question. It's a dull question. I've answered it about 4 or 5 times. I see it all the time. I usually dismiss it. Every once in a while, I'll say, oh, you know what, today I'm going to do it, and it always gets a lot of views and everything, and each time that I write about it, I try to come at it from a different angle, but I got a very, very insightful comment on my last attempt, which was just last week, where somebody said to me, the people that ask this question aren't interested in an answer. They're interested in trying to expose what they view as a plot hole for whatever reason, and it's sort of a gotcha. And that is made me realize that it's a more generalized thing. It's not just the Eagles. It's just I'm tired of the gotcha questions. Like, I found a plot hole, and then I have to step in and, no, you really didn't. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on this?
I've got two thoughts. The first is, when I get tired of a question, I find myself wanting to post, and usually not posting, a one-sentence answer. In this case, it would be, have you ever tried to tell an eagle what to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that actually links to what you're saying about gotcha questions.
Yeah.
I want to give I didn't know why I was doing that. Now I do, thanks to you, John. I wanted to give a gotcha right back to them. But also the fact is that Tolkien, now back to the letters, Tolkien did answer that extensively. And he talked about how he had made not a mistake, but he'd created a danger for himself by creating the Eagles,
Deus Ex
and especially
Machina.
the way they acted as a Deus Ex Machina, the hand of God in The Hobbit. And now he knew that people would spend their lives doing this. And what was most important is that he wrote The Lord of the Rings. He had to just make very sure that they weren't that. And if you look deeply, you could see they couldn't be that.
I think they
it wasn't their job, and they knew their job.
I think they are the Deus Machina in one instance, and it's at the very end when they come to the Black Gate, and Gandalf practically begs Gwaihir and says, will you please bear me one more time? And Gandalf knows that he's more than run out of favors with the Eagles at this point, and Gwaihir says, I would bear you where you will go, even if you were made out of stone. And to me, this says Manwë specifically sent him there and told him to do whatever Gandalf asked. That's the only way that could have happened.
But only to do something after the ring was destroyed.
100%.
Because as Elrond saw and foresaw, it was the people of Middle-earth who had to defeat Sauron. That done, the Eagles will save people and help you celebrate, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Matt, you have thoughts on the specifically on the Eagles question before we move on from that one?
Yeah, no, I do. But, we've talked about it a couple of times, but my mind, as you guys made fun of me earlier in a way, goes to...
No, we weren't making fun. We weren't making fun. I just want to put that out there.
Celebrating my differences?
Yes.
That's
right. That is accurate.
So you're going to get that right here. You're going to get that right here, right now. By the time that they were ready to make a move like that, it was January.
Yes.
And
they left.
Hobbits weren't really renowned for being hardy related to that kind of weather, especially if they didn't have 11sies. So I think that there's a real problem with the distance they're talking about. I think we're talking about
the distance and the altitude as well.
It's altitude. Yeah. It's not just that. It's exposure. It's also January. Mm-hmm. It's also wind chill. Wind chill is going to decrease that by maybe 30 to 40 degrees. And I don't think anybody believed or just dismissed it as being something that none of the hobbits would actually be able to survive.
I don't think Legolas would have survived that.
Well, he might have been. He would have had. It would have been a bad time. He would have had to have a lot more ale. A lot more ale.
That is very true. I mean, and as I said, we could kill this question in 50 different ways and do 10 episodes about it, and it's still going to come back because people love to find what they believe are plot holes. Like another question that I'm tired of hearing, and I'm just going to throw this one out.
Hold on. I got two. Hold on. I got two real quick other ones, real quick. I think there was a concern about domination of the eagle with the ring being present or close to the eagle.
Oh, yeah. What happens when they say, "Give me the ring or I drop you"?
I think that it's possible that even an eagle is going to have some problem with a powerful ring like that. The other thing would be something earlier that you both said, which is eagles are not Uber.
Yeah, it's funny. They're not. You read my answer about the app, right?
Yeah. So I don't think any one of those are more important. I think all of those reasons are actually not plot hole reasons. They're actual reasons.
Yeah, I think it's just almost a meme at this point. Like another question, I'm going to give you one more before we turn it to you guys to see what you're sick of hearing about. One topic that comes up a lot is Arwen and her choice. She made the choice of Luthien, and Arwen was a rather late addition to the story in terms of how he was writing it. He decided that Aragorn was going to be more akin to Beren, and so he needed a Luthien, so he scrapped the whole idea of him marrying Eowyn, who was actually two separate characters at one point. And he had to come up with an elf, and it was Elrond's daughter, Arwen. And of course, she has to make that same choice that Luthien made, and also that Elros at one point made, and that Elrond made, except in the other way, that he wanted to be immortal, that she would be mortal. And people ask all the time, well, why did she have to choose that? Why couldn't she just be with Aragorn and then wait for him to die and then go to Valinor at that point? And I think I want to ask, mostly I want to hear from Sid on this, because that's a spiritual mess, don't you think?
I think it's spiritually very clear. But actually, I'm going to go on the personal side.
No, what I mean is
first.
people believing that. That's kind of a mess, that they would believe that she would really wait out the clock with Aragorn and then sail west. It's contrary to everything Tolkien believed.
Well, in two different ways. First of all, Tolkien believed in true love. And would you really want to live tens of thousands of years after your one beloved husband, in Arwen's case, wife maybe in your case, had passed away? Or would you rather stay with him wherever it is that human souls go and depart with your beloved forever, probably all the way back to God?
Yeah, that's the big one for me.
The idea that mortality is a bad thing is a total misunderstanding of Tolkien. Mm-hmm. Mortality is the gift. And it probably is, because probably what happens, and there's a lot of evidence for this in other works of Tolkien, including Leaf by Nigel, when we die, we get purified and we get to go be in the true heaven, not Valinor, but in the land before creation, where Eru Ilúvatar himself still dwells. And elves yearn for that. They tire of living forever until Earth is gone.
Even the Valar will tire of the world after a time. And they're bound to it as well until its conclusion.
Exactly. And so if you fall in love with a guy and he can get you out of there, I mean, isn't that your classic romantic rescue story?
But why? And it's also, why would she leave him alone? Why would she put him through that, where he's going to be I mean, think about it. She's got to be thinking, I don't want him hooking up with that Eowyn in another 10,000 years in the afterlife. I got to make sure that doesn't happen.
Good point. And as someone married almost 40 years, it's not always easy, but we wouldn't leave each other behind.
There you go. By the way, one of the people in the chat, my friend Alice, said Elros's place. Like Melrose Place, but Elros. Matt, do you have any thoughts on the whole Arwen mortality thing that crops up?
In Tolkien, doesn't love conquer all?
Yeah, that's 100%. Yeah.
So that's that doesn't surprise me too much. That's going to be love is going to win there. And as far as mortality being a gift, the reason it's a gift is because it's relief of sorrow. Mm-hmm. If you're immortal elf and you lived for 5,000 or 6,000 years, you have seen scores and scores of generations of friends that are dwarves, humans, whatever. They've all died, come and gone. You've lost even elves in battle. You've lost so many people, and after a while, there's just a load of grief and sorrow that in the end, immortality becomes the curse, as opposed to mortality.
More and more of a burden as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think that is displayed very well in Tolkien's works. It's actually handled pretty well, I think, by Jackson, to tell you the truth.
Yes, definitely.
Because
he did a good job.
There's this disbelief in death that you see when Legolas is looking at Boromir dying. there's that look of disbelief and just awkwardness about the death that he's suffering, and you see it in the Arwen thing, you see it in the Luthien thing. It's this real curse that they're living with that they don't really realize in the beginning, but after a while it becomes something that's just so laden with sorrow that they really want to just go home and be done with it. And so it is a blessing. It's
Yeah.
really actually a blessing to not have to endure all that.
And coming in from the chat, classical romance. That's the genre that Tolkien was writing, classical romance. So Matt, since you're on a roll, I'm going to hand it over to you. So to answer my question, what are the topics that you're tired of, that you don't want to hear of, that should be put to bed?
Oh well, I kind of know why it's not been put to bed, but I'd like it to be put to bed. Only because I think there's just so much. I mean, there's just so much evidence for why it should be put to bed, in my opinion, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that is planetary Alec and Caligon.
Oh, where he's
Planetary
depicted
is
as being practically mountain-sized.
bigger
Yeah.
than mountain size. In
Miles
fact,
long.
it really,
Yeah.
yeah, it really stems actually from this misinterpretation of what the peaks of the Thungorodrim
And it's amazing. I just brought that
are.
up earlier. We just spoke about this, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the towers, peaks of Thangordrim and towers of Thangordrim are used interchangeably, but there are 29 other instances where Tolkien talks about towers of this, towers of a fortress, towers of whatever. There's 29 other examples, and this is how he really means them. I've seen some art that really captures the issue, which is there are slag heaps of smoke towers that are connected to the
The furnaces.
underground,
Yeah.
underdeep. Right, and they are called the Towers of Thangorodrim, which, like a lot of towers, fortresses in the world, are named after something else. In this particular case, those slag heaps, the Towers of Thangorodrim, are named after the peaks of Thangorodrim, which are part of the mountain range set behind the gates of Angband. The gates of Angband are being one entrance only, and so I've seen some good art out there actually that gets this right. The reason that's important and so critical to Calgon is the idea that he would land on the peaks of Thangorodrim, which are 36,000 feet each, and separated by a certain distance that's as typical to volcanism or any other kinds of plate tectonics. There's a base spread between peak to peak, and for a dragon to be able to land and destroy, if that's literal, which it's not. If it was literal, the dragon would have to be, in my calculations, it would have to be 15 miles long or more. Now that's
I
bigger
think
than the whole
I
city
have
of
to
Tokyo.
I have to comment on that. I think it is literal, but it's a misunderstanding that they broke mountains because they weren't mountains. And I talked about this earlier. The elves looked at these three peaks that were smoking and thought they were volcanoes. And our understanding of it, as you just said, that they're slag heaps connected to the furnaces. They're industrial chimneys. They're smokestacks.
Yeah,
They're not as
I
large
agree
as what
with you.
people imagine, but when you use a word like mountain, people have a very it's like when Tolkien
Well,
says wings, and people take that literally when it's not meant to be literally.
well, in this particular setting, though, the mountains are there. They're not smoking; they are mountains, though. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are towers that guard the gates of Angband, and they are they are also referred to as the towers of Thangorodrim. So when he lands and destroys them, he's landing on those slag heap, smoking towers that are around the entrance to Angband. That's still a very large dragon, by the way.
Yeah, the
But
biggest of them
it's
all, but still
it's
not miles long.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I
I'd
and
like,
the
I'd
other
like to give a
problem,
yeah.
Wait, let's Sid
oh,
speak.
go ahead.
I'd like to give a mythical angle on this one. This problem is far older and larger than Tolkien. It's actually as old as Earth itself. Um, in Native American tradition, there are dragons, and the Smoky Mountains in the Appalachians, which are 300 miles long, are the back ridges of a single sleeping dragon, 120 miles long. If you go back to ancient China, there's a description of the northern dragon, which makes it clear its wingspan is thousands of miles. And yet there are also, dragons that a knight can fight with, sword against breath. This has been a mystery about dragons literally around the world for thousands of years. Now, that doesn't mean what you guys are saying about the misinterpretation of Tolkien's towers of Thangordrim built as part of a set of buildings underground versus the actual mountains, totally legit and clear. But there's something about the human imagination when we think dragon that goes from bigger than a house to bigger than a castle
Mm-hmm.
to bigger than a mountain to the size of a mountain range. It's a challenge of human imagination. Dragons keep getting bigger, bigger, and bigger, maybe because our fears and our problems keep getting bigger and bigger
You
and
know,
bigger.
and I think that what Matt is saying though is very true in the sense that it's a tiresome subject when people ask specifically, well, how could Earendil and a bunch of birds defeat something that big? And you have to say, well, how big? Not as big as what you're thinking.
There's a
Agreed.
thing called there's a combat a fighting theory out there that's very common. That it's called the meaningful combat rule.
Mm-hmm.
And the meaningful combat rule is that a an eagle the size of Thorndor with a wingspan of 150 and 180 feet, which is 75 feet in beak to tail proportion. That's how big the eagles are. Can't have meaningful combat with a dragon that's 15 miles long. So that's problem
Yeah.
number 9.
I mean, even an
Problem
army
number
of them
10 is
couldn't.
yeah, and if it was that big, Tolkien would have described it that way. He also would have been able to belly flop on all of the
Yeah, the entire
army
host
of,
of the Valar would have been done, right?
and his fireball would have been bigger than
Yeah.
Hiroshima,
It would
and
have
I
been a
mean
new. Yeah.
literally would have been that
Yeah.
big. And then the last thing I'll say about this is there's another thing called the meaningful reproduction rule. Meaningful reproduction has to do with the fact that we know that Caliban was a father, and
Mm-hmm.
that he was born of a mother, and I'm not going to get into the dynamics of
Oh,
that.
obviously,
But
yes. Please don't.
if they're not going to if it's not going to work, then it means then that and Caliban was the son of Glaurung. He was very
Well,
very
wait, hold
large,
on. They
but
never said he was the son of Glaurung. I don't know where you're getting that one from.
he was well Glaurung is the father of dragons.
Yeah, but there have been. I have to assume there have been a few
You're right. Yeah,
generations between.
yeah, he could be the grandson. That's true.
Yeah.
My point is there's a continuation of linkage between the reproductive rule with mothers to fathers and all
Mm-hmm.
that in size, and then like I said earlier, there's the meaningful combat rule. So, there's probably 6 or 7 other major
Yeah.
problems to him being that big. And we've just touched on a couple of them. Yeah.
Yeah, Gandalf said that he was the biggest dragon, but that doesn't mean that he was so much larger than the second biggest dragon.
Yeah.
That's.
If I had to
that's
put my
way
finger
of
on him,
putting
I
it.
would estimate he was probably around about 210 feet long
Yeah.
and
Oh,
about a 315 foot wingspan. That'd be my estimate.
real quick, because we have to give Sid some time as well. Is there any other topics that you're just done with?
No, I think we should just cover one today and let
Okay.
Ted do his.
Okay, Sid. What comes back over and over again that you're ready to put to bed?
Different types of things are been there, done that. All of us who've been around this for 20 years know the answer and we get tired of it. The other, and this is more bothersome to me these days, is ridiculous questions that undercut everything Tolkien was about.
Mm-hmm.
One I came across last week was who would win in a fight between Gilgalad and Elendil? Hey
Oh,
guys,
yeah.
they were on the same side.
Yeah. Yes.
Furthermore,
Why would they
weren't.
fight?
Yeah,
Yeah.
why would they fight? But second of all, they were primarily kings, not warriors. It's kind of like asking who would win in a fight, Theodore Roosevelt or Winston Churchill. It's that absurd.
I think Roosevelt could take him, but no, I agree with you. I mean, I think you used a word here that ridiculous, and I think I'm going to give you a coping mechanism here, Sid, and I think you're going to find this useful, especially on Quora. Sometimes a ridiculous question deserves a ridiculous answer.
That's why I said what I said about
Yeah.
Roosevelt. But the problem I have with that is it undercuts everything
Mm-hmm.
Tolkien was really giving us, which is a tremendous gift.
Yeah.
And I understand how it happened. There's a chronology of games. I mean, even the original idea of Dungeons and Dragons, which I played rolling dice back in the day.
That's still how it's played.
And, and totally. And by the way, with no props at all, it was totally in our minds, out of our imaginations, sitting around, eating pretzels and talking for hours at a time. Um, and I understand, and then of course that turned into video gaming, and
Mm-hmm.
then it got involved in big business. I understand how these things progress, but what is lost is all of the deeper values. You guys mentioned that the elves are weary of the world. Well, so are we with our short lives. And one of Tolkien's greatest values, his argument for the importance of fantasy on fairy stories,
Yes.
was escape. We need a way to step out of the earthly drudgery of living as if we're walking through the Midgewater marshes on a good day and the Emyn Wheel on the bad day.
That would be a very bad
And
day trekking through the Emyn Mule, right?
yeah, right until you get to the dead markets,
Very,
it gets
very hot.
worse.
Oh, you're going in that
And,
direction. Okay.
exactly, and so escape uplifts us out of it either into wonderful childlike humor.
Yes.
Bombadil represents that, or into elevated wisdom, or Elrond, or elevated beauty, Galadriel.
Yes.
And Tolkien wants us to uplift that. And when we get caught in questions about who fought who,
Or who would win?
all of the
Yeah.
beauty of, you said earlier that, Tolkien, and I agree, can be viewed as a romance, but he can also be viewed as an epic, as a vast
An
lesson
epic
like the
romance.
Bhagavad Gita. Well, no, but take the romance out for a minute,
Yes.
because you can also be viewed as an epic like of war, like the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Bhagavad Gita out of India. And those are teaching us how to live in the time we are given, as Gandalf said to Frodo, given how we would live if we
Yeah.
were faced with a war to end all wars. And it's very important that at the end of The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf says to Merry and Pippin that the whole reason for the War of the Ring was who Merry and Pippin became when they went home.
Yeah.
Well, who are we when we go home after reading Tolkien? That's my question.
Yes, absolutely. But I do want to expand on something I said earlier about the ridiculous questions. I don't have time for it either, but sometimes I'll indulge it as a bit of sport. I had a question once that said, who would win between Fingolfin and Captain America? And I thought, well, this is so ridiculous that I should just ignore it. And then I realized that they didn't say who would win in a fight. So I was like, here is my opportunity to be, as I like to say, aggressively silly. And I said, well, you didn't specify a fight, so let's come up with some other contests. So I said, first we'll have a drinking contest, and then we'll have a fashion contest, and then they're going to play Super Smash Brothers, and then I'm going to detail what happens. And so just let you guys know that Captain America won the drinking contest. Fingolfin won the fashion contest, and then for Super Smash Brothers, it was very close. But the part in it that I put in that I'm rather proud of is that Fingolfin chose a character as his avatar, Sephiroth from Final Fantasy, and then Captain America says that guy, he's a bad guy, and Fingolfin says, well, I can't be him then, I have to be somebody else. So it's I think it's okay to have fun with it, and that sort of like lets off a little steam about getting frustrated with repetitive questions, especially on Quora. They can get very, very silly. I think Sid earlier, before we were broadcasting, you said something about could Thor move Grond, that kind of thing, and it's like, well, I mean, yeah, of course he could. Why wouldn't he? It doesn't have any particular enchantment upon it. It's just big. Matt, do you have anything to say about what Sid's saying?
Here's, yeah, and I agree with everything Sid said. My only add to his would be, there's one aspect in some of my questions where I do take those on, but I take them on a little bit differently. Sometimes I get silly, a little bit just for fun. But there's one aspect that a lot of maybe people don't know. Maybe even you guys. I think you do, but there's there's something really lost that happened after the year 2000. The D&D traditions, the Melee, the game Melee, which was invented 2 years after D&D, those two are really the granddaddies of everything. And sometimes I will get into an answer that has an aspect of how to play this out on a game on in a game situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes using the old MERP guides, which were well researched by Iron Crown. The Finland team is a very good team. I used to be associated with them many years ago, and I sometimes will answer my questions that way. And it's really not to be too nerdy, although it probably comes across that
There's
way.
there's nothing
But it's
wrong with
really
being
to
too nerdy though. What are we doing right
I
now?
know, but
you know.
well, I know, but this is beautiful. But my point though is that I'm really doing that actually to keep the old arts alive.
Hmm.
I don't think people really realize that I'm trying to answer these in ways that people can see that there's a system of magic actually that could be fleshed out using a lot of canon passages for how these relationships in magic work. That some of these systems, especially the old Iron Crown systems, had that really well figured out using because they just did exclusively just Lord of the Rings research. There was about 20 researchers for that. They had a license for 15 years, so they were legit. And before 1997, when that license ended, I know that Jackson was heavily influenced by that kind of what you might call modeling and gameplay that helped him figure out a lot of things that were rendered in the movie. And so again, I will answer those questions in ways to demonstrate how the old arts used to work. For anybody who wants to look at how it was done, they can go to the website or they can go to my space and see how to actually do that still because it's lost. And I just think that it used to be part of the legendarium in a way. It still is, at least as far as lore is concerned. And I think it's never really going to ever be not connected to it. So I try to keep it alive.
And I think we just want to say, that, are we all in agreement that Gil-galad and Elendil are equally matched? Right? They wouldn't fight each other, but if they did, they're equally matched, right?
Well, nobody thought that Fëanor was going to put his sword point to Fingolfin's chest either.
Yeah, that was a big
But
shock for everybody involved.
well, I I know, but I guess what I'm saying is, bro. I mean, this kind of thing could happen. I mean, I'm just saying
Yeah.
you
Well,
could have
it's
a
funny
battle.
because
But
Sid
yeah,
mentioned that
I
specifically, but I just tackled the question. It wasn't worded as who would win in a fight, but it asked who was the
no, I know.
more No, I'm saying that this is a question that I got just the other day. Who was the more imposing warrior, Elendil and Gil-galad? And I answered and I said, I think we're meant to understand that they're equals. They're both kings. They're both very mighty. They're both very tall. They both fought hand-to-hand combat with Sauron. They both won and lost, and they both died. And you could make the argument that perhaps Gil-galad has thousands of years of fighting experience since he's been High King of the Noldor since the fall of Gondolin. Or you could make the argument that a mortal like Elendil being his equal is very, very impressive.
I would say
Yeah,
if we're talking about, I would say if we're talking about bows, which they're both going to have bows, I'd probably give the nod to Gil-galad for that. If it was hand-to-hand melee combat, I'd say 50-50. If it
Well,
was knives,
yeah.
I'd say 50-50. If it was fists, I'd say 50-50.
Yeah. But I mean,
personally, I just wouldn't want to fight anyone
yeah.
who had more than 1,000 years of daily practice, and that
But
does come to. But
would you want
even
to
with
fight
that,
Elendil though? You wouldn't want to fight Elendil either.
yeah.
The
But my
guy
point
was
is, yeah.
nearly as tall as Eluthingle was.
But I think this also represents two other key points. One is that I think in terms of the description of the two of them battling Sauron, John, you said it beautifully, and you're absolutely dead on. What he's saying is the kings of the elves and the kings of men are one and equal in the war against those who attack the elves and men of Middle Earth. That's what they represented. What the last alliance of elves and men meant as fullest, and the equality is a measure of that. And I think you said that beautifully.
Well, thank you.
Um,
And we're
Yeah.
actually coming. It feels like 30 minutes was the exact right amount of time because we're coming to the end of that. We have 30 seconds left, so I'm actually just going to stop the timer here and just ask, just real quick, for each of us to give our final thoughts. Sid, we'll start with you. Final thoughts on tiresome subjects.
Anything that forgets Tolkien and what he was all about, if you don't know what it means to understand myth and legend as guides for the best way to live in this world, I encourage you to step up and step in to the gift. Perhaps the easiest way in, according to Tolkien, is escape. Get away from the drudgery of endless battles and uh, things made primarily for making money, and come into the depth of things made to help us grow in love and wisdom, as Tolkien wanted to encourage us all to do with him. Co-create a better world, whether it's a fantasy world or this world, and leave the rattly gaming. No criticism of it. It's a wonderful thing in itself. But step up. Welcome
Yes.
to the Council of Tolkien.
Okay, my final thoughts here, and from the chat here, somebody says some people lack a sense of wonder, and I do agree with this. But I think that my big thing is, and there was one person on Quora, and I think Matt, you remember him. I forget his name, but he kept asking a lot of these sorts of questions in a very repetitive and very aggressive manner. And not only me, but a bunch of other people on there who were seasoned writers said to him at one point, stop trying to rewrite the Legendarium. Tolkien wrote it the way that it is because that's the way he wanted it to be. That is the world that he created. If you think you can do better, get yourself a word processor and start writing your own novel. Stop with the gotchas. The guy has stood the test of time, and just the fact that three nerds are sitting here on Twitch and eventually YouTube talking about him for hours, many, many years after his death, proves it, that he knew what he was doing, and you don't know better than him. Matt, final thoughts?
Well, the reason that we're all here and the nine is doing what it's doing is because people who are deceased and gone from the world did what we're doing 30, 40 years ago. They're talking, they're writing letters, they're emailing, they're interested in bringing it forward. And what we're doing is bringing it forward. It needs to be brought forward. It's too important to work. It's too important of a message. So we're in the baton handoff as we live our lives now, and it's just worth. Some things need to be championed, and there needs to be valiant people who champion them, and we're it for now.
For the current generation, at least, right? Okay.
Well, in our own little world, yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
sure.
So that's our first segment. The second segment, this is going to be your topic, Matt. Now I actually let you guys know ahead of time what my topic was going to be, but I'm very curious about the topics that you're going to bring up. Matt, the next half hour is going to be yours. I'm not going to stop the timer until you're done explaining what it is, but tell us what it is that you want to talk about for the next half hour.
How much time? How much time do I get to introduce the topic?
As much time as you need within reason.
Okay. Well, um, the one I think I want to talk about is the the fallibility of the Valar. I think is the one I want to go with. Um, there's some interesting things happening between what Tolkien is trying to communicate with his pantheon of demigods, the Valar. How he's in universe. He obviously they're required to help him make and design and create, but I think that the display of their abilities and their fallibilities in not being involved for so long and not understanding the plights of what the peoples of Middle Earth are going through is almost a way of setting it up to show how it's generally a failure and um, um, not necessary. Out of universe, there's God. Eru doesn't need any help to make anything. But I think that by putting this pantheon of gods in there and showing how pathetically uh, disassociated they are, numb to the actual plights of the world, because they don't suffer any of those plights or any of those sorrows, really, except the fact that now it's dark and the beautiful thing that they created in the trees or the towers, the lamps are now gone. It's always about them usually. Really illustrates, I think, the fact that these Valar, these Ainur, are nothing more than gifted and challenged beings that are no more or less tempted by the um, the problems that humans and beings of the world are facing.
Okay,
They
so
have the
okay,
same
wait.
kind
That's hold on, Matt. I
of
said
problems.
within reason. That's a lot of introduction.
Right.
Okay, let's start.
So that's so that so
Let's start the
yeah. So that
timer.
general issue. Yeah. So that general issue is kind of what I want to talk about for
No,
a few minutes.
I love the issue, and I wanted to hit on a few things that you mentioned. One that was very interesting, though, and I think this is a question that we should all discuss. What the Ainur going down to actually live in the world, was that Iluvatar's intention, or did they ask for that and he said, "Sure, why not"?
He wanted them to come in and bless the world with their gifts. So yeah, it was
Yeah,
by intention. The
but
problem was is that these artists were given this role and they should have done what they were supposed to do because they were directed to do that. But it's the governance aspect that I think was faulty. Not
yeah,
that Arrow was faulty in design, but I think Tolkien was writing it this way to show a faultiness in the construct itself, to
I,
show that
yeah.
governance isn't actually possible.
The other thing that you mentioned was how disassociative they are and how out of touch they are, and especially with the race of man. They don't. They decide they're going to leave Middle Earth and they're going to take the elves with them. They want to live in a place that is untouched by death. And of course, that doesn't last forever because there is death in the Undying Lands. Several times over, Melkor brings death. The Noldor bring death, and then mortals come to live there anyway at the end in the Fourth Age. So, and people tell me, well, why didn't they bring men along? Well, men hadn't awoken. Well, why didn't they wait? Because they were impatient. And I think that a lot of the issues with the Valar come down to either they are impatient or that somebody is impatient with them.
I agree with everything I've heard, and I think it's only half the story. In terms of the errors of the Valar, coming back to how the Ainur got there, it's even more complicated. Because I remember a talk that Tolkien gave, it's a recording that's very hard to find, in which he talked about the error of the Valinor in, of the Valar, I'm sorry, in the Second Age, in building Numenor. Their problem was they were over-involved. They went from under-involved in the
Yeah.
first age and letting the Noldor play out their thing, and then men got involved, and the Valar said, "Okay, we've got to do something." But then in the second age, they thought they could build men up to close to angelic status, and that was a huge error that led to the downfall of Numenor. And so they made the error in both directions,
Yes.
under-caring and over-caring.
And to just
And I believe that age by age, they're
yeah.
slow learners. It
Yeah.
takes a few thousand years, but the Valar did learn, and that's why in the third age they got involved, but without showing their power. Because if you show vast angelic power to human beings, we feel daunted and we
Yeah.
say, "Daddy, mommy, take care of us."
Two things I
But
want to
if you
bring
send
up.
an old gray-haired man with a staff to help out,
That's a little different. Yeah.
maybe we'll listen. Yeah.
Two things I want to touch on that you said that I think are very important. One is for all his terrible faults, Pharazôn, the last king of Numenor, said one thing that was very important and I think very true. He said, "Why can't we even just go to Erisea and visit our friends? They can come to us, but we can't come to them. It seems kind of unfair." And the answer that's given through messengers, of course, because the Valar wouldn't actually go to Numenor and speak to them, is, "Your lives are so quick to us. If you died, we would be sad." but it's like they're going to die anyway. They're mortals, and I think it's sort of like like I said, they want no death, but Iluvatar created a world where death was not only natural but not meant to be feared. Melkor created the fear of death. The other thing I wanted to touch on.
Let me jump in on that one point
Okay.
first, because the Valar were also envious
Yes.
of the gift of men, the chance to go home to Eru.
Yes.
So their sadness wasn't just, oh, the men are gone.
Yes.
The sadness is we can't go with them.
Yes.
We're bound here.
The
they
other
didn't want to face that either.
The other thing, and I think a lot of people miss this when they read the creation myth here, is before entering the world, even after, to a certain extent, and entering the world, because the Spring of Arda was such a static thing, they are experiencing the concept of time for the first time. They have never before had any concept of what time was. There's a reason that outside the world, in the void, where does Iluvatar live? The timeless halls. Time had no meaning to them. And now they're actually having a sequence of events. They're witnessing entropy. They're witnessing things breaking down and how things could get worse and how things could get better. And it's like you said, it takes a couple of thousand years to adjust to these sort of things.
I would say, with one exception, I agree completely with what you said, except during the Song of the Ainur, music is harmonies, sounds played out in time. So they got a tiny, vague sense of time, because the Song of the Ainur makes no sense unless you have a drama played out over time, as the song was.
But what is the
hadn't lived it
universe
yet until
if
they
not?
came.
What is the universe if not their song? He said, "Behold your music," and showed them
Yeah.
the universe. So, but and even when he showed
And
them a
that's still-
vision of it, they didn't see the whole thing. Iluvatar sees the whole thing. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end. They see what is now and what he allows them to see. And I think
what
that
they're
I would
ready
just
to.
point out.
Go
I would
ahead.
just point out something about cosmological, metaphysical nature of the universe. That the Ainulindala is basically Tolkien's word for what is called the ordinate rule, and that's this streaming fluid rule that's at the base of every single thing in the whole universe. That's all operating together for creativity and cooperation and sustainability, and that's how it's built. And so, the Aina Lindell is this song. It's a very poetic way of saying this, but if you think about it, the way the universe is working, I'm not saying physics necessarily. I'm talking about things greater than physics. There is a type of song. I think that he's really using poetic ways of describing that kind of thing.
It being a song is it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. A song doesn't go on forever. It goes on forever in our heads. We don't always remember a melody or a lyric or just a beat or something, but it does begin and it does end, just like the world. Now, Matt, I want to ask you, since this is your topic and you're talking about the fallibility of the Valar, excluding Melkor, because he's Satan, right? He's the devil. He's the worst. Who do you think is who the best and the worst of the Valar? Like who makes the most mistakes, is the most fallible, screws up them? Who's the screw up, and then who is the one that always isn't the screw up?
Well, I understand what you mean. It's kind of like saying that a one-legged football player is a screw up. It's
Not if he's the
Manway.
kicker.
Manway. Well, but I ain't gonna look so pretty either. But my point is that he's tasked with doing something he's not capable of doing, which goes to my first point, which is they were all set up to do something they weren't really designed to do. They were designed to help create because Eru wanted them to be able to create, and they did that. But they were all obedient to Manway, and Manway was not the greatest leader for governance role. He had no clue at all, in my opinion, about anything to do with evil. He didn't understand it, didn't know what it smelled like. He didn't know anything about it at all when he saw it, which Morgoth Melkor played much to his advantage, and
Mhm.
so did Sauron, by the way. And when you have, I hear this topic about the ban, and I always chuckle to myself about the ban because it was the same ban that they broke to conduct the War of Wrath.
Yeah.
There was no real ban. There was always just their governance. They could have done it earlier. From the time that the War of Wrath happened, all the way until um, the um, the fall of Numenor was 3,319 years of doing absolute
Yeah.
zilch. And
It's
what I'm
interesting
saying
that
is
you.
that maybe they thought the second age was under control, and the early third age was under control, and it just wasn't at any
I think they
time
knew
ever
it
really
wasn't
under
under
control.
control, but they were wringing their hands a lot. Now, you said something really interesting there about the ban, and I had a question about this. Somebody asked me, was the ban of the Noldor, was that fair? And I said, no, of course it's not fair. Yes, you could say, okay, you guys, you want to go to Middle Earth, stay there. We don't want you anymore. But veiling the Undying Lands and making it impossible to find also stopped all of the Sindar and the Avari elves and everybody from sailing to the west for a very long time. And what did they do wrong? Nothing.
Well, I agree with that, but that's
Yeah.
not the ban I'm talking about. You're actually totally right. I'm talking about the ban on the that was put on the Valar to not act and meddle in the affairs of Middle Earth.
Well,
That's
I
that's
don't think they
it,
were banned from that. I think that they decided not to because the last time they did it, they wrecked the joint.
well, yeah, and that's also my point. That's another one of my
That
points,
that was
which
a
is, I mean,
self-imposed.
what's better to deal with it early or to wait until Morgoth has half a billion
Yeah.
orcs,
Yeah.
a million trolls, dragons, Balrogs, and everything
Well,
else? I mean,
when
they,
you
Manway is just simply not tracking what has to
Yeah,
be done
you know
early to stop all.
when you started and you answered the question, you said Manwa is the screw up. At first I thought, well, I don't agree with that, but then after everything you said, no, you're right. Yeah, no, I was going to say maybe Tolkien was the one who was the biggest screw up, but I think you're right.
Well, but again, it's not his fault, and
No, it's
it's
not. You're right.
really, I mean, yeah, he's just not equipped for the. But this goes back to my other point, which is
He's too good.
Tolkien does this, I believe, on purpose to illustrate the the impossibility of the construct made for these Valar,
Okay,
and he's
and
doing that to
okay,
show that there is no pantheon of
we
gods;
have
they're
to,
never needed. It's
Matt.
just about Eru.
We have to
Yeah.
move along here a little bit. Who
Oh,
is the one that is the best though? Who is the one that you think gets it the
Can
most?
can I get a word in on this one?
Oh yeah, of course, Sid.
oh yeah.
I'm
I
looking at
expected it to be a
I'm
quick
looking at-
answer, and I
yeah. I think it's worth the time, honestly.
no,
I'm looking at
it
a
was.
different age. I'm looking earlier.
Yeah,
I would say it's a close tie for best between Elbereth and Yavanna.
But Elbereth, you
Elbereth,
mean Varda? Okay, yeah,
Varda,
yeah,
yes. Elbereth Varda in creating the stars,
absolutely, yes. But in
and
the yeah,
Yavanna in creating the trees, and then the two of them creating the trees of light.
yes,
I think, and they never miss a beat. You know, there are times they're sitting in the background saying, you can see Alvarez going like this and saying, "He's my hubby. I can't tell him how wrong he is on this one."
and I just this just flew into my head because I'll give my opinion on best Valar in a moment. But when we're talking about worse, Matt's saying a lot about Manwë, and he had me convinced because I was going to say Tolkien, but um, Aula has a terrible track record of students, doesn't he?
Well, that's what I was going to. He was
Yeah.
also the only one to himself almost fall right to the edge
Hmm.
into the air of pride and try to create something without Eru, namely the dwarves.
Yes.
Now he caught himself at the very last minute and pulled himself back.
Yeah.
But I think that fault is why he had so many. And for people who don't track this, Sauron was his student, Saruman was his student, Feanor was his student, and they all got themselves in deep, deep doo-doo. And I think the
Yes.
reason
Well,
is, well, let me just
yeah,
finish
good.
this thought. The makers of physical objects with magical power are at greatest risk in Tolkien's world, because if I can look at something I've made and say, wow, a ring, mine, unlike
It's ours, precious.
Galadriel, who says, in this natural dell, I pour water into a basin and it becomes magical. I put water into a glass and Arundel fills it with power. The unnatural objectification, making an object, leads to mine, and mine is the fall.
My pick for best, though, and you made great points with Yavanna and Varda, or Elbereth, as she's called in Middle Earth. Olmo, 100%. This guy saw the mistakes that Manwa was making and shook his head and said, I don't agree with this, and I'm going to fix it in my own way. And he eventually did. I wrote a 50-page paper I know you guys read on Tour, and how he was basically almost champion, and he's the combined champion of Ulmo, and then you have Nienna's champion being Gandalf, and then you have Iluvatar's own champion being Bombadil, and how these three brought the elves home and fixed everything. It took a few thousand years, of course, but Ulmo was the only one that cared about mortals. He was the one that would... He went to Numenor. He didn't send messengers. He went to Middle-earth. He didn't send messengers. He knew what was going on. He was involved with things. He made sure that Tur was there, and he waited for him. When Tur arrived at the shore, Ulmo said to him, "You're a few years late. I've been waiting for you." Can you imagine any of the Valar waiting for years in Middle-earth? No, they're thinking, man, I could be up in Valinor partying down. Why am I hanging out here, you know? He took a much more hands-on approach as far as any of the Valar do. I would give credit to Aroma as well, but I think Ulmo was the greatest of them all.
In that way,
Let me
absolutely, yes.
let me weigh in on something to close this out real quick if we're at the end of time.
No, we're not, actually. We're not.
Okay, well, good. So what Sid said, I want to just say amen to. Have a pantheon of these types of angels. There's always going to be one that has something to do with the love of the creation of the thing, and that really that's going to be the kiss of death right off of the bat for a world that has beings and temptations and the love of things that are made. He's going to be the guy who not necessarily recruits these people, but just attracts these people. That's the,
Yeah.
you know, I can just see him. He's over there in the mirror, just going, "What have I done to make these guys?" And maybe somebody is going to tell him, you know, dude, it's not you. It's just that you attract these kind of people. You know, that's what's going on here.
That's a good
I would
point. Because
say
let me cut in here, because Aula, you know, he's too much like Manwa in a way that he doesn't understand evil either, and you know, just like Manwa believed Melkor when he said, "I'm sorry," and he really wasn't. You know, and he believed him, and he let him out of Mandos after, what was it, 3 ages. With Aula, you know, he's thinking these guys like Tarandor and Feanor and Myron, these are great guys. They're just like me. They like to make things. But are they making things for the betterment of everybody, or are they making things for themselves? He's not thinking that. He's got that mind of, I'm going to share my craft with you, and you're going to share your crafts with others. And these guys are thinking, you're going to share your craft with me, and then I'm not going to share anything.
yeah.
There's an interesting parallel. There's an interesting parallel in Narnia, where of the 4 kings and queens of Narnia, Edmund, who fell furthest, became a holder of wisdom after a time. So I think Aule ultimately learned his lesson because he, alone among the Valar of Valinor, knew what it was like to fall. And that carries a gravity. Pun. Falling carries gravity.
Yes. Now, you know, and another point about this whole topic that I think is interesting, I got a comment not too long ago. The question was about why the ring couldn't just be taken to Valinor to have them unmake it there. Of course, that did come up during the Council of Tolkien. Council of Tolkien. This is the Council of Tolkien. It came up during the Council of Elrond, where it was, Glorfindel said, "Why don't we just take it to the west?" And Gandalf said, "No, they won't accept it. It's a Middle Earth problem." And I got this commenter who said, if I was there, the real armchair quarterback type thing. If I was there, I would have pointed out that the Valar have a responsibility to deal with this threat in a very direct way, because it's one of their guys, one of their Maya, that is causing all this issue, and something that he made, and they really have a responsibility to do this. And I replied, and I said, and then the reply from Gandalf would be, yes, but they won't. And here we are.
I differ. I think it would be, yes, they did. I'm here.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah,
although he was
I'm
still
here. I'm the enemy of Sauron.
Yeah,
I'll show you how to do it, because we're not doing it for you anymore, kids. Grow up.
Okay, but hold on. We're missing one key major problem with all that. The person who's going to take this back on the boat is going to go 50 miles before the ring takes hold of him.
Oh yeah, not to mention that Eriador was not safe. But the person was always like, well, if I was there, I would have made this great point. And I said, yeah, you would have made this great point, and it wouldn't have mattered. Because this is the situation that they're in.
I believe it was Gildor who said, hey, we won't even make it to the Havens.
No, Gildor wasn't.
Exactly.
Galdor.
Whoever ever has access to the ring, even on a boat going to Valinor, it's not going to go anywhere. Yes, that's right.
Because the person was saying, well, maybe one of the Valar should show up and take it themselves. Maybe Aule could put on a rock and smash it. And they're saying they have a responsibility. I would bring up that point, and you would be ignored.
Totally ignored because they didn't care about anything even up to that point. Yeah. So why would they come intercede now?
I mean, I think they do care.
Disagree. Hold on. I got to come in here, guys. Yeah. I completely disagree on that reason. I think there's an element about the Valar and the history of men that is really important to address. And it's not only in Tolkien. So often you get, if the world is bad, why doesn't God come and do something about it? And it's just like kids saying, Daddy, Daddy, I need you to fix me. And that's fine if we're 6 years old. But I've got news. We are all now adult children of our Creator. And I believe that if we went to God right now and he said, why don't you come down and fix it? He would say, I sent 8 billion of my children to fix the problems. Get to work. And I think that's what Gandalf represents. I will send one thing, and one thing only, guidance towards wisdom. Because what matters in the end is not, does Sauron get defeated? What matters is, do the free peoples of Middle-earth free themselves of this burden?
Yeah, and
I want to point out that I agree with that totally. Real quick, John, real quick. I don't by any means begrudge or lament the fact that the Valar don't intercede. I think they should and they could, because that's the world in universe that Tolkien made. My point though is that the lesson that Tolkien's getting at is they don't, because they don't really exist, and it's really up to us to make the world. We are the ones that have to fill the world with Eru. If we all fill it with Eru, then evil loses. Is the point?
I have to comment on this as well. One of the last few things that Tolkien wrote, which you could find, his last writings are scattered throughout the history of Middle-earth, but the one that came after the history of Middle-earth, it was a book, The Nature of Middle-earth. And there was an important topic that he wavered on throughout his life, and at the end of his life, he went back to his original thought, which was the fact that the Eagles of Manwë are in fact of the Ainur, that they are incarnated Maiar, just like the Balrogs, just like Gandalf and Sauron. And this is important because one of the biggest things that comes out, we talk about responsibility, and the commenter that I got that says that he would have pointed out that the Valar have a responsibility here. And to be honest, what I wanted to say to him is you would not have been invited to the council. But I was nice about it. But the real issue here is, like, it comes down to that, is that people don't see it as just because someone may have some small hand in creating an issue does not mean that they have to completely fix it, because once it becomes a global issue, it's everybody's problem. And the eagle, like, we're going to go back to this for a moment. People say the eagles have a responsibility to help because they live in Middle Earth and they're living creatures like anyone else. And no, they don't. They're not living creatures in Middle Earth. They are angels, and they are here to watch over us, but they're not Uber. And it's just the same thing. The Valar are not in Middle Earth for very good reason, because they were in Middle Earth and they really, really messed it up. It was Eden, and now it is what it is. Now it's Europe. That's a big step down, going from Eden to Europe.
And I want to interject here something that I totally agree with John about on this. I 100% agree that the research indicates the eagles, and Tolkien says it too, but I mean, the eagles are definitely shape changing to become eagle form in Middle Earth, which is a major point, because if they are Maya and they have taken this eagle form to be in Middle Earth, in Arda, which is similar to how in some ways how Bjorns change shape. There's something related to that as well. But these beings are here, and that's one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, why a Maya cannot be trusted to be around the Ring of Power.
Yes.
Yes. It is an amplification of temptation. Gandalf didn't even want to have it in the room with him, let alone anybody else. We all can imagine what the ring would do if the Balrog had gotten it. Can you imagine what would happen if a relatively powerful Maya eagle put it on his claw and it formed to fit his eagle claw? I mean, it would have been a major temptation for him, and I think it would have been a major problem. So they weren't going to have the
complete
eagles
disaster
anywhere near it.
And by the way, from the chat,
he would have grown as large as Ancalagon.
From the chat, and I believe this is responding to Sid, a message of stewardship. I believe that was in response to what you were saying, Sid.
Can I reply to that? There's a passage in The Return of the King that I think it's so easy to miss. It is Gandalf replying to Denethor, and the key line is, "I too am a steward."
Yes.
And I'm not catching the rest of the words exactly, but he says...
I'll bring it up. Keep talking.
Yeah, please. If at the end of all of this, there is one living, growing thing, implying even a plant, that can still someday bear good fruit, I have not failed. And then you remember that Frodo and Sam were saved by a thorn bush with foot-long thorns. And I imagine, what if Sauron had gotten the ring back? And what if the last living creature on Middle-earth was a thorn bush? Gandalf would be there caring for it, as the steward of all that is good in Middle-earth, even if it was just one thorn bush.
I have the quote
and
here
that
for
to
you
me
if you're
is
interested.
Yeah, go right ahead. That to me is what Gandalf is saying to Frodo. We do what we are here to do in our own time.
So this was Gandalf's quote. "Unless the king should come again, well, my lord steward, it is your task to keep some kingdom still amongst that event, which few now look to see. In that task you shall have all the aid that you are pleased to ask for. But I will say this, the rule of no realm is mine, neither of Gondor nor any other, great or small. But all worthy things that are in peril as the world now stands, those are my care. And for my part, I shall not wholly fail of my task, though Gondor should perish. If anything passes through this night that can still grow fair, or bear fruit and flower again in days to come. For I am also a steward, did you not know?" And then he sort of drops the microphone and walks out of the room at that point.
I love that passage.
It's
That's
an
so good.
amazing passage. 1 minute warning here if you want to wrap up anything that you're saying before we get to final thoughts.
Um, my last thought would just be that
Oh, do we want to just? I'm just saying. Do we want to just go to final thoughts since there's only a minute left, or are we? We're pretty good
yeah,
here.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Okay,
I
I'll
well,
stop the timer.
my only last comment would be that I just think that Tolkien. I've said that before, but I'm going to conclude with this. I think Tolkien really set this up to be an example on display of a construct that is feudal, and he was making a point of it that the Valar could not handle governance, and they couldn't figure out what they really had to do, and they didn't do a very good job at all.
My final thought is that they are capable, and that they did learn. It just took until the Third Age for them to figure it out. Um, and that's really all I have to say about that, Sid.
It takes you this one, and I think the Astari are the solution that they learned to intervene, but not with power. To intervene to show us, the free peoples of Middle Earth, that's us guys,
Mm-hmm.
to discover our own power by using our power well. And well is what? With pity and mercy.
Pretty patience and mercy, right?
Yes. Tolkien
Yep.
capitalized pity and mercy. He didn't. I agree with patience, but he didn't
Yeah.
capitalize that one, which I
No, but
find
I
interesting.
feel that he
But
he would have if he had the opportunity to use the word. I think he would have.
I would agree. But I want to say one more thing, and this comes back to something you mentioned earlier, John. Not about the Valar, but how did the Ainur get here? And it's a very complicated piece. There are those who came out of love for the Valar of Valinor to serve, like Olorin, who became Gandalf, and Melian, and so forth. Then there are those who came out of love or fear of Morgoth, like the Balrogs, and those who came one way and switched sides, like Sauron.
I think
But
the
there are
word you
also,
were looking for there was awe.
yes, but there's another group, and Tolkien mentions this. When Morgoth broke, he broke the world, and a vast number of souls fell, not with him, because evil does not unite. Good unites under one leader, Eru. Evil fights against itself forever, as Ungoliant fought Morgoth. So there are all those horrific creatures beneath Khazad-dûm, beneath Moria, in the darkness, just souls trapped in buried darkness, souls trapped, the lives of orcs, in miserable, apparently irredeemable, but not actually irredeemable lives. Specifically, Tolkien said their redemption was beyond his imagination, yet he still had faith in it. And so I think this is why the Valar have a hard time governing. Even Eru didn't plan for the breaking of the world. He had to
Yeah.
patch it up during the Song of the Ainur, coming up with ideas to try to make it work again. And age after age, we're still playing it out. And all of us, Valar included, are still learning how to do it.
Okay.
And since the Fourth Age, it's primarily our jobs.
Yep. Okay, so Sid, the last major section here is going to be yours. I have reset the timer. I'm not going to start it until you're done introing what your topic is that you're going to bring to the table. So go ahead.
I'm actually, can you hear me? I want to make
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually going to leave, I'm going to put in 4 different questions out there. And I would love it, especially if the folks sending in comments would say which ones we should talk about. And if no commenters speak up, then John, you and Matt can
Okay.
pick it. One, I consider Frodo's time in the Old Forest, not from Old Man Willow through Bombadil and especially Goldberry, and on to the Barrow, to be utterly central to the quest. He grew phenomenally in strength and wisdom in just a few days, and that's a universal theme in fairy tales. Hold on.
Okay. That's one. We're not hearing you
Another
say. Oh,
theme.
there we go.
Are you here? Yeah. When I'm looking at something else on screen, my voice bounces. The next is the four elements: earth, water, air, and fire. How do they show up in Tolkien's works? How Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn are the bellwethers of their races. What is the age of men? What is the world like at the end of the fourth age? And what does that say about life today? And if you want to go even a little wider, what is an age? In our language, we have theological ages, mythological ages, geological ages, religious ages, and historical ages. And I think when people try to talk about an age in Tolkien, it gets very confused. And maybe Tolkien was a little confused too. Do you think everybody caught those, or should I just run
Yeah.
them quickly
No,
by
I think.
again?
Well, the chat's a
I need
little
you to go over
quiet.
them again because I didn't get the air, fire, and water. Is it air, fire, water, and
And Earth.
yeah, right.
Okay.
Earth,
So
water,
and
air, and
all right.
fire.
Okay. So in
And
choosing.
bellwethers of the races,
Okay.
ages of men.
Okay. So in choosing a topic, we have a lot of people in the chat who are what I refer to as lurkers, which means that there's a lot of people watching, but not a lot of people talking, which is perfectly fine. Now, Alice has said that they think the four elements thing is the most interesting. I'm going to say that if anybody's lurking and you, I mean, personally, I find the Old Forest to be the most interesting. Which topic do you, out of those that Sid has come up with, if anybody else wants to throw their hat in the ring, or maybe we could dedicate 15 minutes to one and 15 minutes to another. But
That's what I'd like to do.
that's what you'd like to do. So, do you want to do the four elements and the Old Forest, or Matt? Do you have any thoughts there?
Uh, epic start and end is interesting to me because I think it's a quick answer, but that's my
That's a
historian
little.
side.
I honestly think it's too quick of an answer. Another person has cast their lot for the elements here. I think
That's fine with me.
I think that's the one we're going to talk about. It looks like.
Let's start with that and see
Okay.
where we go.
Hi, Jesse. The
I
elements. Okay, I'm
actually-
starting this. I'm starting
Okay.
the timer now.
Okay. I actually gave this as a lecture to a college class at one point.
So
And I opened it with a
picked
question that I would
correctly.
like. Yes, I would like everyone out there, whether you're lurking and not going to tell us your answer or you want to speak up, I'm going to suggest two things. There are four elements and there are four hobbits. I believe that each hobbit expresses one of the elements. If you accept that to be true for the moment, let me scramble the names so I don't put them in the same order. Frodo, Merry, Pippin, Sam, Earth, Fire, Air, Water. Which hobbit is embodying which element? What's the evidence
Okay.
of it?
So, I mean, for me,
And-
I'd like to quickly answer my opinion, just real quick off the cuff. Earth is an easy one for me. That's Samwise. He is described as being sturdy. He is a gardener. He works with his hands. He's of the land. He does not want to be in a boat. He wants to walk. He is humble. He is low in that sense, and in the best of ways. I think that Pippin is fire. He is the youngest. He is the hot-headed one. He is the one that speaks his mind. He is the one that moves the plot forward quite a lot, as fire is a spark. I think that Merry represents water, and I think it's because he sort of flows with the plot, and he lets the current take him where he may, and it's to some pretty wild places. And then, obviously, by process of elimination, I believe Frodo is air. He can disappear as if into thin air using the One Ring. He is the stealthy one. He is the quiet one. He is the one that you don't always see or you don't always hear, but his presence is always there. He is also the most important one because air is the breath of life. That is my thought on it.
If you don't mind me,
Matt, you want to chime in yeah.
I have all those lined up exactly. Nice job, John.
Oh, okay.
Except I make an argument for switching Merry and Pippin. Here's why. Pippin was always the one that seemed aloof and kind of ready to kind of go with the flow with things. He would go with the ale. He'd go with whatever, He seemed like he was really easy, go lucky. Come across
I
mushrooms and come across
I have to
carrots and
point
all this kind
out
of stuff.
that Pippin was the one
Yeah.
who told Elrond to his face, "We're going, and the only thing you can do to stop us is to lock us up."
I hear you, but I think that was. I don't disagree with that totally. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it was more a friendship thing than anything. But the reason I think Mary is fire is because when it came to the really critical issues, he always had so much more spunk and bravery. I thought. I mean, putting your dagger into the back of the Witch King's ankle. He was the one that was so irritated with the time that the Ents took at the Entmoot in the book as well with the Huorns. It was Mary that really showed a lot of really, I think, more fiery spirit to him. In more ways than Pippin. I think Pippin was more easy to go along with things in a flow matter, like I said. But
Yeah.
but I don't disagree that they all have their spunk to them. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
they
they
all had
all.
elements of all.
Yeah, they all embody all of the elements because they're all complicated characters, of course. But everything that you said is correct. But it also I think reinforces my own view is that water is also pressure and it builds up over time and then bursts forth and can be quite formidable. And that's what I see
I
Mary as
don't
being.
disagree with that. Sure.
Can I?
I want to hear Sid's thoughts now because he's smiling from ear
Yeah,
to
yeah,
ear
yeah.
and he's got something good to
No,
say.
it's well. First of all, we all agree. The only thing we agree on is Sam, and I will prove what Sam is right because Sam in the House of Tom Bombadil, where everyone is who they truly are, slept like a log and didn't dream, and that's as earthy as you can get. I I disagree with John on two and see it a little differently than Matt. Part of this is that I know the tarot and I know the secondary meanings of each of the four elements. Earth is about staying alive, enduring, making it through the battle, and we all know that Sam was based on the assistance to
The Batman.
um, the Batman assistance to the officers in World War One, and so much. Yes, and he was just there to keep Frodo alive, to carry him when he had to. Water is associated with love. The suit of cups in the tarot is the suit of hearts in the ordinary deck. And what motivated Mary? His love of Theoden King. He went on that last leg of the quest because he would not leave the king he had sworn out of personal emotional love to.
It wasn't merely that, it was also that he did not want to be left out of the poems and songs as well.
Which is a quality of love.
Yeah.
Look at how most of our songs and poems are about love. So, and Pippin is an interesting one. He is a fool of a took. And the role of the fool is the young. Remember, he's also the youngest.
Yes.
The young intellectual. And where did he end up? He didn't end up on the grassy heartland of Rohan. He ended up devoted to the airy kingdom of Gondor. So I believe he's destined for wisdom through learning.
What makes
which is
Gondor airy?
The city of Minas Tirith.
Well, Gondor literally means land of stone, though.
True, but look how. But there's that Tower of Guard overseeing.
Tower of Guard. No, I see that. So you're saying he's heir because of his watchfulness.
His foolishness in the dark, as in dropping that stone and waking
Yeah.
the Balrog. That's how I read the passage.
Yeah.
And
I just wrote a whole thing about that too. It's funny.
But also the other reason is this: fire is also the spear, the arrow. It's something that flies out of nowhere and can do powerful magical things. And where does Frodo go? He goes to the fire. He goes to Mount Doom. And so if Frodo is fire, he's the, as Elrond referred to, making reference to Beren, small, while the wise are looking elsewhere, small hands are doing the great work.
I
And
really
he
want
is
to
the
say at this
mysterious-
point, not to interrupt
Yeah.
you, I want you to finish your thought, but I really want to hear what the chat has to say. If anyone wants to type, please do.
I would
want
love to hear that too,
yeah.
please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Continue, Sid.
Yeah, oh, no problem. I thank you for doing that, in fact. But the Frodo is fire, the unexpected, utterly changeable element. And also he carries Arundel's star, which is a weapon of fire when used as a weapon, and a guiding light when used as a lantern. And he
But
carries
I could make the
place
argument.
of ultimate fire and darkness.
I could argue that who uses the Star of the Arundel for its specific purpose, though, would be
That's
Sam.
true, Sam.
Yeah, Sam
But
used it.
only when
Sam
he's
and
stepping into...
Sam knew what it was. He understood better than anyone what it was. He said, "What we have is basically a Silmaril.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the same story that Beren was in."
Good catch. Yeah, but that's a very grounded wisdom, and it's also at a time
That is true.
when he needs to step in because Frodo can't.
Yeah.
When Frodo is.
I mean, I
wounded.
think that the Star of the Arundel, in and of itself, represents all of the elements. I would say
Absolutely,
because it's glass, which is earth. It's light, which is fire. It is.
It's filled with water.
It's filled with water, and then of course it shines light air, through it. It refracts, so it's everything. That's
absolutely. And the
Yep, I agree with
Silmarils each had. There were three of them, and they embodied three of the four elements.
One of
earth,
them winds up in the
water,
sky,
and-
one in the water, one in the earth, of course. Actually, the one that went in the earth went into a fiery pit. So it's fire and earth.
And also it's kind of an echo. It's the light side of what the Balrogs were.
Yes. Well,
darkness.
I always saw the light side of the Balrogs as being Aryan.
Agreed also.
Yeah.
And the secret flame of Anor, whatever the heck that was, which may well
no, wait, you're
Aryan.
conflating two different lines here. One was, "I am a servant of the secret fire," and then he said, "wielder of the flame of Anor." It's two lines.
Yeah.
So he's saying servant of the secret flame is him saying, "I work for Iluvatar. I'm an Ainur just like you," because he was saying it to the Balrog. And the other was, "My fire is greater and my fire is holy. It will burn you."
Yes. And that refers. Remember that Morgoth was afraid of Aryan and her power to burn him.
She burned him pretty good, yes. Now,
So what are we going to do?
somebody from the
What are we going
chat.
to do about aligning?
Somebody from the chat pointed out, agreeing with Sid, but in bringing their own sort of take on Frodo being fire is that he was tempered. But I would argue that they were all tempered, and it was like what you said earlier, Sid, that what is the journey about? It's about who you became afterwards, and who was more brave and who was more tempered than Merry and Pippin.
I don't think we can do more or less here. They were each tempered to a different destiny.
That is true, but they weren't like Frodo, who has this legacy from Bilbo that he was sort of expected to be like Bilbo. He's the Bilbo analog in the story. Or like Sam, who is an outdoorsman who works with his hands and he knows the lands. He probably had the best survival skills of the four. And then you get Merry and Pippin, aristocratic, rich boys, who were...
Merry, by the way, associated with water, since he was of the
Bucklanders?
the people of the Bucklanders on the river.
I mean, that's a good point too. I could see that Merry and Pippin are almost like I think like me and Matt had this thing where we're sort of like, yes, that too, you know. I really do think that Merry and Pippin, whether it's Pippin Merry or Merry Pippin, that's your fire and water, and that Frodo is air. But yeah, it's this sort of question
Well,
that, you
I
know.
want to pitch in. I want to pitch in. I want to pitch in a support for the air thing for Frodo. This is why he has the bigger view. He does the Manwë thing that Manwë should do by being active. Manwë is the god of air,
The
and I
king
think Frodo
king of
just
the breath of Arda was the exact title. Solimo.
that's right. And I just think that of the three, that alignment is just really clear to me for air, and Sam definitely earth. My only last pitch for Mary being fire is I just think there's I just think there's more passage canon evidence that Mary has got a real little bit of a temper to him. He really is got a real fiery spirit in a lot of in more ways than Pippin shows his. And so I guess that's just my final pitch for that
I think,
alignment. But
yeah,
um,
nothing you're saying is wrong. I don't think. I think it's how we interpret fire and water that differs, not the characters.
And I would
mhm.
simply say it's so fun to get up
Yeah.
together and finding people who can disagree with me because we're all right.
Yes.
And that's what I
Well,
love about
but what
being.
you asked for was an interpretation, right?
Exactly. And so I'm going to throw out another one.
Okay.
There are four species and four elements. The elements are earth, water, air, and fire.
Hmm.
The species are elves, dwarves, the race of men,
Men.
people, and hobbits. Four elements, four races. Sort them out, guys.
All right. I'm gonna say the dwarves are Earth. They live in the Earth. They delve from the Earth. They were probably made out of Earth. They were crafted. They weren't created by God. They were crafted, and then life was given to them by God. True life. They are of the deep. They are comfortable underground. The elves are air. They're not comfortable underground. They need to see the sky. They need to see the stars. They are the Eldar, star people. There's just no getting around that one, I think. The other two are a little bit more difficult. I think we can't put hobbits in water because hobbits and water don't mix very well. So hobbits have to be
Well,
fire. They're the smoldering spark that is a comfortable fire that burns and gives us warmth and gives us comfort and makes us feel comfortable. And then they could be a weapon when need be. And then I guess that leaves men with water because I'm getting an echo here. Who's okay? That stopped.
I was going to
Um,
say something.
let me just finish with men as water because we are mortal and we flow through I'm going to quote a friend of mine, a rock star from the Netherlands named Arjen Lucas, and we flow through the river of time.
I'll go with that, and here's why. Think of how important love is for human beings, and water is love.
Hmm.
And also, Bilbo's little poem about Aragorn also applies to the hobbits. From the ashes, a fire shall be woken. The hobbits can lie on the earth like embers, seemingly unimportant. No one even knows they've got any warmth in them. But out of them springs like a diamond from a mass of coal.
You know what, Sid?
Springs of fire
You're so
that
right.
can change the world.
You're so right because the men of Numenor bring over a plant to Middle Earth and they say, "There's this plant that we like. It just smells nice," and the hobbits are like, "Let's smoke it." So
okay. So,
they
my
invented smoking.
yeah. So my thoughts on this real quick are dwarves, earth for sure, elves, air for sure. Men are fire beyond a shadow of a doubt in my mind because of the passions, the tempers, impatience, the short lives, the fact that Sauron thinks they're the most easily corruptible. That's all fire passion to me. And the reason hobbits are water to me are because in keeping with a lot of the teachings of the Tao, they're just the chill group. They're the group that just is the water. They are the Tao. They just go with life. They just go with what it has nothing to do with whether they swim or not. Has nothing to do with
Oh, I
embers
was being
or.
cheeky there.
Oh, I know, I know. I'm just saying, I don't think it has anything to do with those other things. I just think they're the most go along to get along, middle of the river, take it easy, enjoy the coolness and water. I mean, that's just them.
Yeah. Are you
Partly
noticing
because
a
fire.
theme here? That me and Matt will always agree on earth and fire, but then we switch up water and well, we'll agree on earth and air, but never water and fire. It's just,
I'm going to
I
go.
don't know.
I'm going to support Matt on this one, although I may be disagreeing with myself, because at the heart of the Tao Te Ching, water flows to the lowest level. The hobbits flowed into the Shire like a lake and sat there. And
Next to
that
the
is so
water.
right on target. So thank you. Exactly.
Next to the water. That's where they love to be. But the one that really my only conclusion here is that I mean, almost in every single passage related to men, they are the ones that are afflicted with passions, and that is a fire sign symbol.
I don't know. Like either way it could go because you could see fire as being passion, but you could also see it as being comfort and life and light as well. So I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer here at all.
And how and love is a type of passion, and
Yeah.
a passion that puts us very in danger of falling as well.
Yes.
So it can be looked at both ways. And I don't think there's right and wrong here. Has anybody spoken up in the comments, or I encourage you all to now? And
Not
John, what do you
not
say?
about this specific thing. Although I'm encouraging anybody to speak up. We have like another a little bit over 10 minutes in this discussion, and I'm enjoying it. So I wanted to say, Sid, do you want to apply the four elements to anything else in the Legendarium?
To be honest, I'd rather talk a little bit about the Old Forest.
Oh, okay. Let's do that then. You said that it's critically important. And you're so right, and so many people miss out on this. And I'm going to give you the reason that I think it's critically important is that Frodo, he's 50 years old. He's very much like Bilbo was, except he's even more Bilbo than Bilbo was. He's even more Baggins than Bilbo was. He's less Took. Because he's not Took. He's a Baggins and he's a Brandy Buck. It's very different. He doesn't have that fiery Took spirit. He doesn't have that. He's the Baggins Brandybuck. He's even more of a homebody. He loves the Shire. He's in love with it, and now he's forced because of mortal danger to venture out into the wide world and to go to places that he never thought he'd go to and to see things he'd never thought he'd see, to have an adventure, but not there and back again. It's there, and then we'll see what happens. And in the Old Forest, even before the Old Forest, I'm going to say that it goes back further. It goes back to when he meets Gildor, and then goes through the Old Forest and through the Barrow Downs and up until Bree, because he learns that there are strange things out there, but they're not all bad. There are things that absolutely want to kill you, and then there are things that will feed you and help you, and that there are wonders out there.
That's exactly it, and I want to pick up on it. I'm going to say something very brief. For those who want to learn more about this, it is absolutely central to every version of the Arthurian legends. There is a forest between where you are and Rome. Originally, it was written in France. It was talking about the wildlands between France and Rome. But later, when they were written in England, it's a magical forest, because how do you cross the English Channel in a forest? But you do. That became a mythic element. Robert Bly is the best source on this in English. He talks about how in every legend and myth there's an entering into illo tempore, sacred time, and we are transformed when we make that step. In our world, that's entering into fairy, but of course, Tolkien's people are all in fairy, but are they? The hobbits live ordinary, unmagical lives until, as you said, they meet the high elves. And Frodo is made an elf friend. And my friends, that is no small thing. And if you read closely, actually, you're not made an elf friend. Well, there's an active declaration, but it is something elves literally see. They see a light in a mortal and know this person is an elf friend. And Gildor sees that, and then just after that, what happens? They go into the old forest, and your point about necessity is really key here. But remember, it was a mortally dangerous journey that Frodo had to make, not because it was mortally dangerous to him. It stayed that way as long as he had the ring.
No,
He
no,
was
wait, hold on.
saving the Shire.
What I was saying was that he was in mortal danger if he stayed.
Right, but that wasn't why he left. He left because the Shire was in mortal
That is
danger
true.
if he
That
stayed.
is very true.
And so he's doing it out of love. His love for his homeland is sending him off. And remember that Tolkien was a soldier in the trenches in World War I. Very relevant here.
Yes.
So he enters the forest. But now look at the beginning and end of the time in the forest. The first big step in the forest is all four of them almost getting killed by Old Man Willow. And if you read Frodo's in that passage, he goes crazy. He can do nothing. He runs down in a totally empty place yelling for help when there's no one there. Of course, there is someone there, Bombadil, but
Yeah.
he doesn't know that. So he's driven to utter uselessness in the face of Old Man Willow. He then spends 3 days, and the other hobbits do all, and they all grow in it, in the presence not only of Tom, but also of Goldberry. The funniest thing about the whole passage
Frodo has
for
such
me,
a crush on her too.
yeah, the same kind of devotion that both Sam and Gimli feel about Galadriel, I'd say.
Yes.
And there's a hilarious passage where just as Tom is saying, none who walk on 2 legs can control or know the weather. He says, and there's Goldberry out there in her reign. And it's so clear that Goldberry makes weather. So what is she? I don't think we've looked deeply enough at that. I'm not going to go into that tonight. We don't have time. I'll see you next month.
The daughter of the river woman is who she... But he says,
Exactly.
He also says, this is her washing day, and then it's a torrential downpour from dawn till dusk.
And I believe that she and Bombadil together as, in a sense, Adam and Eve before the fall, living in the forest in purity and innocence, elevate all of the hobbits, but especially Frodo, because what happens next? Yeah. They're given clear instructions, don't stop at those cold standing stones, keep going.
And what do? They rest right there at a standing stone.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to give... Sid, I hate to cut you off, but because there's less than 5 minutes,
1 minute.
We have to give Matt a chance to speak on this.
Let me finish in 1. Okay. That's my plan. They fall to the standing stones because the magic is too powerful, and it is Frodo, who could do nothing against Old Man Willow, who defeats a Barrow Wight, which is very, very similar to a Nazgul later on.
Yes.
And he is growing towards being ready to fight the Nazgul. Fast forward to Weathertop, he fights the Nazgul, and it is his courage and his use of the name of Eldrith that saves his life. He recovers in Rivendell, and Gandalf says he is becoming transparent for those who can see.
And it's
all
interesting
because of what happened in the Old Forest under the influence of Goldberry and Bombadil.
That's why I said that it started with Gildor, because that's who taught him about invoking Elbereth as well. Matt, I know you can speak about Bombadil for an hour, but you got about 3 minutes if you want to.
I don't need to speak about Tom Bombadil for an hour.
I know, but I know you can.
But yes, thank you. That's my wheelhouse. But I will say that both of you guys are, in my opinion, exactly right on. I don't have any ads other than to say that everything you've said is exactly the reading and the message of what's going on there. I will say one quick point about Goldberry. She is definitely in my opinion, she's definitely an incarnate Maya. There's
Hmm.
water
I
sprite or not, she is definitely a Maya of some sort. We know that the Ainur came into Ea with the Valar. We know that that's what the passages intimate clearly happened. I think she's one of them. And the only other thing I would close with is that the non-magic, the removal from magic, the insulation from magic, the absence of magic in the hobbits was indeed actually their magic.
Absolutely.
That's what's
The
magical about hobbits.
where I disagree is classifying Goldberry as a Maya. She describes herself as the daughter of the river woman. No Maya describes themselves as the son or daughter of anything.
Well,
Interesting.
it's metaphoric. No, it's metaphoric. It's a metaphoric daughter. She's the spirit. She's a water spirit
She's certainly a
of
spirit, but
this.
not every spirit is of the Ainur.
No, I know, but she has powers that aren't. They're not. She's not an elf. She is not a nameless thing. Um, she is able to do things and know things that are in the Maya category. I know that Tolkien doesn't say she's a Maya, but the metaphorical disassociation or false association in my mind with the river woman and the river is nothing but metaphor, poetic
I don't know.
metaphor, and it's her way of saying that she's of the water, of the river, of
No,
water in
I
general.
don't know. None of the
But
other, none of them speak that way. Like Ose doesn't say he's the son of a river. I think if anything, she's equivalent to a nymph. If anything,
well, she's
what
certainly
the hobbits would
a
certainly
sort of
call what the hobbits would certainly call a fairy.
well,
Guys, is this
okay,
your
but
next one?
if you want to parse evidence, I would just say that there's more evidence that she's in the Maya category, lesser Maya perhaps, than than an unspecified category of water nymph that is not of
I
any category.
I believe that
There's no category for
I
water
believe
nymph.
that she has no category, and that's the very purpose of a character. Because I mean,
Okay.
I know how you get if somebody says that Tom is a Maya, and it's the same sort of thing. He says nobody caught him yet, but who dragged him down by his beard in the water?
You mean who escaped? You mean who escaped and then trapped her to marry him?
Yeah, exactly. So they're more alike
Okay,
than
so
anything I see.
I
Exactly.
don't. Yeah, I don't think she has any power over him at all. But
Oh, are you kidding? He would end the world for her if she asked it.
oh well, in
I
that
mean,
way, of
that's
course
his
He
not.
would.
wife. What if she's his
He
wife and
wouldn't
she?
live in a house except for her.
Yeah, exactly.
But that,
He built that
yeah, I
house.
know. But that,
He keeps going down and getting her lilies every
Yeah, and he's
year.
bringing water
that's
plants and
that's
surrounding. I mean, he lives for
yes.
her. Of course,
But
that's the greatest
that's
power
again,
there is.
yeah, and that's again all about love.
Well, yeah. So I
Those
mean,
two are all about love.
you
On,
can't say
on
she
that, we
has no
all agree.
power. Okay, so we're done with that section. So before we
Yeah.
end, we gotta talk about our plans, though. Obviously, we're going to be doing this monthly, but and I want to turn it over to Matt since Matt is usually the spokes hobbit on this. Um, you have been talking on Quora and on our group, the Nine, about the secret project. And I think it's time that we announced it here on Twitch and on my YouTube channel. Matt, tell us of this. Well, we know what it is. I know what it is, and Sid knows what it is. But tell us the secret project.
The secret project that we are working on and have been contacted with about. Um, I won't get into that unless you guys want me to get into that part of it as well. But we're writing a book,
Yep.
and I'm talking about a hardbound book. That right now the working title is the Mysteries of Tolkien's Legendarium. It is a book that has to do with the difficult, complex topics of the Legendarium that need explanation. There isn't anything out there that actually does this kind of thing. Actually, we've all seen all the books. A lot of us have all the books, read them many times, but there isn't any books out there that really get into 20 to 25 chapters of the real hard, big, cool things that most people would recognize. Oh, that's definitely on the top 20 list of questions I would want to have answered. Our group, as a lot of you know or have read, we are a consortium and a consultancy group that works also as a writers peer group. So we're writing articles that are being peer reviewed and scored, and graded, and edited to perfect them before we get to the publishers. So that project is something that is very exciting. We've been working on it now for well over a year, basically
About a
now,
year and a half now, right?
and yeah, about a year and a half. And we have enough material. We're going to have enough material for 3 volumes, but right now we have easily enough material for the first book. And I'm not talking about a small one. I'm talking about one in
A
the
good
probably
hefty
the 300.
tome, right? Yeah. And I mean, I know I plan.
300 to
Yeah, the articles that I wrote
300
so
to,
far, I've written 2 chapters, and I know I want to rewrite them and expand. At least the first one, the Hobbit one, I want to expand greatly.
yeah.
The tour one that I
So
wrote, that's already pretty long.
John, your article on Tour and Hobbits, and mine on Goliant and Tom Bombadil, probably about 150 pages
Yeah.
if we really wanted them to be. Well, actually, they're pretty long already. But
Yeah, the
the
tour
the
one
point
is
is
the
that
tour one is 50
we
pages.
all have, yeah, and and both of mine are 25, 30 pages, but each, that is. But Sid's got 2 or 3 that are
The Angel
absolutely going to
one
be
was
in the
really good, Sid. I just want to point that out again. That
yeah,
Sid wrote on
yeah.
the nature of
Um,
angels.
I won't tell you how they're going to
It's
be. I
called
won't
The
tell
Path
anybody.
of Fallen Angels.
Yes.
It's called The Path
I
of
don't
Fallen
think we should
Angels.
tell
It's a
any.
caution to us all.
Yeah, the path of falling. That article,
And
and if anybody's listening,
it's not just the 3 of us either. We have others that are
oh
involved in
no,
this.
there's not. There's 9 of us.
Yeah,
There's 9 of us on the 9.
well, there's
Some
not.
contribute a lot. Some of us contribute a lot. Some of them don't. But it is still a consortium. We all
Yep.
help each other out, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And but I really don't want to get into what the breakdown for the first book is going to be as far as
No,
topic or
but I wanted to
type
just
or
I wanted to
each
give like a
kid.
little bit of a teasers of some as I mentioned what the 3 of us did, but we have Laurel. She wrote a little bit about she wrote a lot about Celebrian, Elrond's wife. We don't know much about her. That was an interesting topic. Dutch wrote
Yep.
about dragons and their nature and their sizes and everything, which that was a topic that we spoke of at the very beginning of the stream. So we have a pretty great group here that is working on it. It's not just the 3 of us.
Eugene is an educated and trained
Mhm.
um, professional in psychology, and his articles are he and Sid make a great pair for anything to do with the psychology of things like Sauron or Morgoth, or the psychology of and the fall of Saruman and things like that. They're so amazing. All I can tell you is that of all the books I've read, the stuff that we've read and put together in our group are book worthy to the very highest degree. They're going to do very, very well, and it's a pretty exciting project.
And I think you should talk about the recent developments, especially since you said you would have more news for us since our last meeting.
Well, we have a publishing company and a movie production company that have asked to talk with us about an NDA and some beginning contract work with our literary agency. And so, this is in the beginning stages,
Mhm.
but it didn't take us very long to get some interest. And so,
Yeah, you put
this
feelers out there, and they came right back.
mhm. And I think that's because there's so many millions and tens of
Yeah,
millions of people who are starving for something new and
yeah.
different and better. I don't think we're getting new and different and better right now out of
No,
Tolkien.
we're getting the
But
Fall of Numenor repackaged another time is what we've been
we're
getting.
getting, yeah, we're getting the good, bad, and the weird, and
Um, well, let
not,
I'd
me.
like
not
to
even the
chime
good,
in.
but
Oh, sorry. Go
I'd
ahead,
like to
Sid.
chime in for one moment. Yeah. Um, I I believe that the book that we are creating and what happened here tonight are very much related. It
Of
is
course.
so wonderful to be in a group of colleagues who can talk at this level without having to answer some of the questions we're all tired of, and to stay at agreeing often and disagreeing occasionally, and learning when we disagree. And I just love that. And I just want to mention, by the way, we will be coming monthly. It will be the first Thursday of every
Yes.
month,
Yes. So the next,
unlike this one.
the next podcast of this is going to be the 6th of June. This was convenient for us to meet on the 23rd, but it's going to be the first Thursday of every month, just as the last Thursday of every month is going to be the List Critics for those of you on Twitch who regularly view my Twitch. Matt, I wanted to ask you, and just to ask all of us actually, the movie part of it is interesting because we were in the business of making a book. And now there's this movie production studio and consulting firm that is interested in us. And I got to ask you, what do you think this is in relation to? Are we going to be asked to be involved in the Gollum movie, or like what do you think is going on here?
No, I think this. I haven't heard yet. They haven't released what the company's interest. Sometimes
Yeah.
they don't do that until the NDA is signed,
And then we can't talk
and that's
about it
fine.
anyway. Yeah. But we
Yeah,
can,
yeah, and then
but
we're
we,
about to be able to talk
but we
about
can
it.
speculate at this point.
We can speculate to say that, and we've talked about this. So us three and the rest of the nine, we know what's going on in the world right now for Tolkien. What's going on right now is that Simon Tolkien is allowing more and more companies to make bids or requests for proposal um, for projects. And what's really lacking in the current generation, not to down anybody about their age necessarily, but the current generation is already 20 years removed from when the first
From the
movies
Lord of
came
the
out.
Rings, yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean they're already almost 40
They're
years removed
classics now.
from when the Silmarillion was published in 1977. So what's going on right now is I think there's a bunch of studios out there who are realizing that their current teams don't have the vision, the ability to render or conceptualize things in Tolkien as well as a consultancy group might. A consulting firm like ours, which we are formed as a consulting group and a writers consortium, is the kind of group you would hire to say, we need you guys to tell us what this generally looks like, so that we can render it properly for a game, for a movie, for a TV series, because we don't have the answers. Now, when Jackson's team was put together, he had a triad of really great people. There was Jackson, Boyens, and Walsh. And in their own different ways, they were really a very, very good group because they had a lot of harmony and a lot of creativity and a lot of expertise to do what they were doing. And they understood the material very well. A group like
The
ours
commitment
is
to
needed
I
by,
just have to add a commitment to
yeah,
authenticity to Tolkien.
yes, absolutely. That was their first and foremost thing. A group like us is first and foremost dedicated to not getting in Tolkien's way,
Yeah.
to tell the story. If you
What is
don't get
the
in his way and you render these things the way Tolkien envisioned, you're going to sell billions and billions of
well?
dollars
Okay,
of
so
movies.
the question though becomes, and that's the question that I've already asked: what is the dream? What do you want them to say to you? After you sign the NDA. I mean, I just got a question not too long ago. Will they ever make a movie out of the Children of Húrin? And I said, of course they will. It'll either be made eventually because they'll get a pitch so great that they'll say yes, or it'll fall into the public domain in decades and decades later, and it'll be made then. Let's do that. Let's be a
Um,
part of that pitch that's so good that they'll say yes. Let's make the Children of Húrin. Let's make
a group
Beren and
like yeah, a
Luthien.
group like us doesn't direct or make anything. What we do is somebody hears about us, we
Yeah,
advertise ourselves, and they come to us and say, look, we want to contract you to be a part of our production meetings, so that we as a group by contract can say that is not going to work and that is not going
yeah.
to work, and items 6, 7, and 9
Yeah,
are beautiful,
but
just
what
keep
I'm
on
saying is,
with that.
before we even get to that point, they need to say
Yeah.
yes. And you said Simon's a little more, well, not a little more. He's a lot more open to minded than his father Christopher was. And J.R.R. Tolkien was like, hey, you either do it right or you pay me a lot of money. I think that if we could be part of the pitch, if we could tell them this is how you approach the Tolkien estate, this is what they want to hear.
I think the
I'd like
best
to put that
strategy
into
for
a,
that.
could I put this into a larger frame?
Go ahead, Sid.
Yeah.
We talked about ages at one point in this
Mm-hmm.
conversation. In the 1800s, the most read book in English in the entire century was Ben-Hur. It was also the most watched movie of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
The most read books of the 20th century were The Lord of the Rings. The most watched movie of the first decade of the 21st century, or may I say the third millennium,
Yeah.
was The Lord of the Rings. What I want to say is, how do we carry through the subcreation, to use Tolkien's own term, of a great imagination and future for humanity for the next millennium? That's what I want to ask.
That's a big one.
Okay. So when you are looking at putting something together, let's say let's just say Second Age, Numenor, or War of Wrath type movie. Let's say we do that. There's so many gaps. The only way that you can actually fill in the gaps with good writers and CGI and things like that is honestly with a group of people like us who can say,
This works, this doesn't.
we
This
have
works, take this out,
we
put
have
that
the
in.
gap.
Yeah.
We have the
Yeah.
gaps. We understand that. But with passages and canon guiding us, this is the way it would look. This
See,
is the way it would feel.
absolutely. But it's also like, obviously they're going to have to, like you said, fill in the gaps, and they'll have writers, screenwriters for that. But they need people to not only say this doesn't work, but why it doesn't work and why it matters.
Right. The problem with this kind of pitch and the benefit of this kind of pitch is that Tolkien fans are in the hundreds of millions,
Yeah.
actually, to
Very
over 200
large
million.
community.
And the problem is that it was written so
From
long
the
ago that
chat,
there's so
from
many
the chat,
people-
the term script doctor came up. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, script doctor actually, and script triage as well.
Triage,
but
okay.
there's some scripts out there that need to be presented the way that Tolkien wanted them to be represented.
Yeah.
And if you are able to follow it and fill in those gaps in a way that is canon and true to form, the most that you can, the fans who have already been reading this now for decades and decades and decades are going to thumbs up it from the beginning, and your sales are going to break all records, because there are so many people who already know about Tolkien that you can't get away with messing around with it.
And I just want to point
cannot
out,
get away with
I want to point out for the people watching now and for the people watching in the future that Matt knows what he's talking about, because Matt was involved in the Peter Jackson production. We hadn't talked about that, but let's put that out there.
I want to add one other piece, which is, if you read on fairy stories and Leaf by Niggle by Tolkien, he left a guide that we in the Nine are following about what genuine subcreation is.
And I want to bring up his letters.
us-
You keep talking, but I'm going to bring up a letter that I want to read from.
Sure. And that would be a great place to close, wouldn't it?
Yes.
He
Exactly
says
what I
very
was thinking.
clearly, Tolkien says very clearly that he wanted people to do exactly what we're doing once we understood that subcreation means to create, both in fiction and stories and these days movies and games and whatever, and also in our daily lives, in the depth of divine creation, doing what the Valar did literally to create the mountains and oceans and stars of this world. We do in our daily lives and in the imaginative stories that could guide people, as he went out to guide people who, for centuries to come.
And
That's the job we're being a small part of.
Yeah.
Our
And I
small
have
hands.
letter 131 with me from the published letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, and I want to read this one brief paragraph of it. For those of you out there who say that if he didn't write it, it's automatically invalid, it can't exist, there can be no expansions, there can be no fan fiction, there can be nothing, I'm going to read you what he wrote, and the date on this letter here, I think I have to scroll down for that, actually. One moment. That's quite the long letter, and I only want to read the one little bit of it. Well, it was in the 50s. He wanted to publish The Lord of the Rings and The Silmarillion as a single epic, which he at that point called the Saga of the Three Jewels and the Rings of Power. And the publisher told him, "We are only interested in the portion of this that is the sequel to The Hobbit. The Hobbit was a 100 million selling book. That's what we want. We want that again. This Jules backstory stuff, not right now." And he comes off a little depressed in this letter, but this is what he said in a letter to Milton Waldman, who is one of his publishers. I'm going to read you just one little bit here. "Do not laugh, but once upon a time my crest has long since fallen. I had a mind to make a body of more or less connected legend, ranging from the large and cosmogonic to the level of romantic fairy story, the larger founded and the lesser in contact with the earth, the lesser drawing splendor from the vast black cloths, which I could dedicate simply to England, to my country. It should possess the tone and quality that I desired, somewhat cool and clear, be redolent of our air, the clime and soil of the northwest, meaning Britain and the hither parts of Europe, not Italy or the Aegean, still less the east, while still possessing, if I could achieve it, the fair elusive beauty that some call Celtic, though it is rarely found in genuine ancient Celtic things. It should be high, purged of the gross, and fit for the more adult mind of a land long now steeped in poetry. I would draw some of the great tales in fullness, and leave many only placed in the scheme and sketched. The cycles should be linked to a majestic whole, and yet leave scope for other minds and hands, wielding paint and music and drama. Absurd."
He's really talking about the importance of a living Bayeux tapestry.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He
He's
said,
talking
"I'm
about
good."
separation being
There are some stories that are going
going
to
on
be
and on.
told in full, and there are some stories that are going to be outlined, and they're going to be filled in by other minds, whether it's writers or artists or painters or sculptors or musicians. And it's interesting that we had news recently. Sid, you got to take your finger off the button. I'm getting that echo. Recently, that there is to be the Lord of the Rings opera. And that's the sort of thing that the Tolkien estate is saying yes to these days.
And a play probably based on Turin.
Well, we've talked about that. That would be a pretty amazing play.
To go from the sublime to the humble, I want to welcome everyone who's listening to go out to Archive of Our Own, or AO3, and I write very short fanfic, 10-minute and less reads about all these things, especially from the Lord of the Rings. Very much looking at honoring Tolkien and the things he almost explored and maybe didn't quite go to yet. So please go take a look.
I myself am writing a fan fiction for that site. I haven't finished it yet because it's not going to be a short thing like what Sid writes. It's going to be quite lengthy. But let's talk about that actually since we're closing out. Sid, you plugged Archive of Our Own. Is there anything else that you would like to plug before we sign off for the night?
I have one.
Well, let's let Sid finish.
Someone ought to mention that we're all on Quora in case some people may not know what Quora
Links
is.
will be in the description for the YouTube watchers.
Yeah, Quora.com for John Sierra and the Lore Master and Sid Kemp. And
well, that's why I need to put the links in the description because there's that other Lore Master. We got to get rid of that guy.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, well, I didn't introduce myself as Lore Master. For those of you who are out there wondering who Matt Richardson is, I am Lore Master on Quora.
One word.
This is one word, and this is my debut. Having anybody know really who I am, which is kind of funny. But
I know who you are. You're Anavata Haranian.
Yeah, that's right. That too. And you're the language expert. I would say that we should announce that our website, lore-master.com, which is the website for the Lore Masters, us, the 9 of us, is a working website. It's up. It's going to be our home for articles, contacting us, and as basically a storefront for our consulting and writer services. And so that is up and already running, lore-master.com. And again, that's our new home. And this has been a lot of fun. And John, I want to give a shout out to you before we close here
Okay.
for putting this all together. What an absolutely pro job you've done. And moderating us has been very well done, and we really appreciate you very much.
I'm so glad you said it. Thank you very much for the kind words. It's for those of you who may wonder. Shortly before starting, I did have to say, Matt, I do this every day. I got this.
You did get it. It was a very good format. Nice job.
Yeah.
And what a combination of talents.
The three of us are a dynamo.
The three of us and behind the three of us.
Yes, I have to say.
I love. Well, Stephen Covey once said, "Celebrate the differences. Mm-hmm. That's what brings wonder and joy in life."
Mm-hmm. We should mention the other 6 members of our party.
Do we have? I thought we had 5.
No, we have.
But go ahead.
We have Jeff. No, yeah, we should. We have. We have Mark Gist, Laurel Callahan,
Almario,
Terrican, and we have Nicolo Andreon. We have Dutch Patterson, and we have Jeff Claiborne from All Things Lord of the Rings. A lot of these folks, those are the 6 besides us 3. Some of us have our own spaces and subspaces, but it's a pretty good group. It's a definitely a top 20 group anywhere on Quora. And last time I did some metrics on it, the 9 have been read by more than 155 million readers. Wow, and there's about almost 16,000 followers for our group.
And that's a ratio you like too, where the viewers are much higher than the followers. Yeah, I mean, shout out to all of them. I mean, they all do great work. I don't get to read it as much as I would like to because I'm so busy, but when I do take the time to sit and review an article, it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
Well, if anybody goes to the 9, goes to the Lore Master site or checks the 9 out, you will see articles there that have been peer reviewed and edited by the whole group of the 9. Those articles are the best you'll ever find anywhere in the world.
What is your favorite one, Matt? Other than what you've written?
Your piece on hobbits and Sid's piece on the angels.
I was gonna say Sid's piece on the angels as well. Yeah,
those two pieces are going to be in the book.
And Dutch.
I know that
Dutch's
work is great. I mean, there's a lot of them, but all I can say is for the people who are here right now, those 2 articles for you guys, despite being, trying not to be biased, they're the kind of articles or chapters you would read in a book and not regret your purchase of a hardbound book that had those kind of articles.
And Sid, what are your favorites?
Guys, it's so hard because I love each for different reasons.
It is hard, yes.
I want to definitely shout out to Almario, Laurel Callahan for taking on, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but taking on a challenging subject.
The Celebrian
and
one?
exploring Celebrian and the very dark side of what might be going on in Tolkien's world. That one just touched me so deeply, not to undercut any of the other ones. And you guys, it's all amazing to me. But and Laurel, I mean, she has touched my heart for several years in her humility and spirit and dedication to Tolkien.
Can I tell you a very brief story about Laurel that is very heartwarming in a way? I had offered on Quora. Somebody asked me what is a thing that every fan of Tolkien should do. And I said, well, there's nothing that you should do, but here's some suggestions of things that you might do that you might find interesting. And one of them was getting your names translated into Elvish. And you could see that under my name, it says Erelise Oronte, Sid, your Alca Orato, Matt, your Anavata Haranian, these are all very accurate Quenya names that are names in the Quenya language, and I love doing it. And I said, translate your name into Elvish, and if you don't know how, you could ask me and come to me, and I'll do it for you. And Laurel came to me, and Laurel is a very difficult one because there's a lot of different ways that you could break down the name Laurel. But I said, I think the closest would be Almariel, and it's basically a maiden gilded with flowers. And I said, but if you wanted to specify golden flowers, you could be Galadriel, which is very similar, Almariel, Galadriel. And she says, I've always wanted to be Galadriel ever since I was a little girl. But she figured she'd stick with Almariel, because it's not an already established character.
Yeah.
Well, I did have one question for you.
Yes.
John, are you working on translating The Lord of the Rings back into Kenya?
I don't know if I could do that. Well, maybe I could translate it back into Westron. I don't know. It was. I don't think I could.
Oh
do
my
that.
God, John! If you do that, we're gonna have to give you a monk's cloak and a monk's haircut. And you can get
you're not touching the hair. No, I'll tell you. There was a story I read on Tumblr, and the Tumblr side of the Lord of the Rings fandom is a very great place to be sometimes, where this guy had a father who loved The Hobbit. It was his favorite book, and he said that he would love to have a copy of The Hobbit written in runes. And the kid actually wrote to J.R.R. Tolkien and asked if that would ever happen, and he got a reply saying, that's a cool idea, basically, but no, they'll never let me print that. Tolkien was the guy who imagined himself having an electric typewriter that he could type in Tengwar. It never got made. But anyway, he did it himself. He translated The Hobbit into runes and made the book and presented it to his father as a birthday gift. And can you imagine getting a gift like that? That's crazy.
Well, here's a way to do it. I mean, seriously, the problem with that people think they got to translate it into the language. If you just transliterated the runes straight over as English, like the word is the and Bjorn is Bjorn.
Well, that word
English, but it's in
we're talking about the runic writing from The Hobbit. You can do that. Tengwar, forget it. Yeah. Tengwar you could do it, but Quenya, forget it. And support from the chat. That would be a cool typewriter to be able to type in Tengwar script.
Yeah,
I'll tell one more.
As long as you don't get into the languages and just straight use English for each one of the characters.
That's easy.
Like that would be gorgeous. It'd be gorgeous.
Oh yeah, a wonderful thing to display. I'll tell you one more Tengwar story. I have a friend of mine who I believe is lurking in the chat right now. I see you there. I'm not going to say her name, but I see her there. And she went to I'm not going to get into too many details here, but a store where you buy certain herbal remedies. And she had her purchase being bagged up, and I guess the topic of the Lord of the Rings came up, and the girl that worked there said, I can write in Elvish, and wrote my friend's name on the bag in Tengwar script. And she showed me a picture of it, and I said, yeah, that says your name. That's accurate. It's so cool. And I said, wait, if she could just casually write Tengwar with a pen like that, just off the cuff, and it says what she says it says, that means she could read it. And I put a very funny message in Tengwar and took a picture of it. I said, show her this and see if she reads it. And that hasn't happened yet.
Left on the show, John?
Well, we're actually done, and we can end at any time. So I think we should think about that. Let's. Is there any very final thoughts?
I got one suggestion for show. I got one suggestion for show and tell before we leave.
Show and tell. Okay.
Show and tell. I have a book that I got a little bit ago. I have another copy of it. This is my new hardbound copy of the Unfinished Tales.
Let's see it.
I've shown you guys before, but I wanted to show you this cover. This is the ceremonial Numenorian military helmet on the copy of the Unfinished Tales. It's a gorgeous book. If anybody gets a chance to get this guy, that's what the symbol looks like on the book right there. And on this side is the Tolkien monogram right there. It's a gorgeous book. If anybody gets a chance to maybe have an excuse to have another copy of this, this is the one to
It
get.
is beautiful.
So that's my
It's
show
so
and
much
tell for
nicer
tonight.
than my Unfinished Tales, which is ancient. Here, if we want to do show and tell, I have the music box, which a friend of mine gifted to me in celebration of 500 subscribers on the YouTube channel. You could see it says Lord of the Rings there, and if I wind it up just a
that's
little
cool.
bit, it plays a music box rendition of the main theme from the Peter Jackson films. Ba ba ba.
Oh, that's good.
Ba ba ba. Sid, show the ring. You know you want to show the ring.
No, Sid, I want to see your
not-
tattoo of Sauron. Sid, I want to see your tattoo of Sauron's eye.
Oh, well, I think that would violate the Twitch terms of service.
I decided not to get that because those who study too closely the arts of the enemy, even for the good, are in grave danger. But
Okay.
Sid's thinking, I got a
did
pair of
pick
Palantiri to show you.
I did pick this up. Let me get it angled right in the camera.
That is Narya.
And
Oh,
it is Narya. I won't tell you how Gandalf got it to me, but I will say it works.
You know what's funny is when Sid showed
I
me
use
that.
it daily. That's how weird. At the beginning, you asked what makes us unique. I use it daily. That's how weird I am.
When Sid showed that to me, I said, "Did you get that from a suspiciously bearded elf?" And he said, "No, I got it from me."
And I want to
good.
say, I've been ill my entire life, and since I got it, I've become healthy. This
you go.
stuff works.
There you go. The red ring.
oh my gosh.
The red
That's
ring.
all we needed.
The ring of fire. Okay.
Well, thanks again, guys. That was a great night. And do we have any final questions from anybody online who wants us to address something?
If anybody has anything they want to ask the panel, please put that into the chat. We're switching over to the ending screen here. The next time I do this, I think I will likely add their webcams to the starting and ending screens as well. But here we are at the Grey Havens, ready to sail off to the uttermost west and do a raid. So if anyone wants to say anything in the chat right now for myself or for Matt or for Sid, we're just getting applause right now is what we're getting, gentlemen. So we always end a stream with a raid, which is basically where we take our community and make them somebody else's problem. So unfortunately, the person that I would have liked to have raid would have been Professor Corey Olson, who does occasional streams where he lectures on Tolkien, and that would have been a great segue here. But he is not currently online. So I thank you, Alice. So I think we're going to raid... we're going to raid my friend Amethyst, who's playing a game called Araikun, is how I would guess to pronounce that. And she's been on the Twitch grind for a while. Looks like she's playing some kind of strategy RPG, so we're going to put in the command there. And our raid message has got to be some sort of Tolkien quote. Do we have any recommendations real quick, gentlemen? No?
Recommendations for what?
A Tolkien quote for our raid message? Or a quick one? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. I am going to say, I'm going to put, of course I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me. And so we're going to put that into the chat portion, everybody in the chat portion. I would direct you to copy it and then paste it once we head into Amethyst Corn's stream. She is, like I said, she's playing some sort of strategy game that I've never seen before. She is a great time. She's very wholesome. So we will see you guys tomorrow. I will be playing Guruman in the afternoon. Next week, we have another podcast, The List Critics, and in 2 weeks, we'll be back here with more of the Council of Tolkien. So here we go. Say goodbye, everybody. They can't see you.
Everybody for coming.
Okay.